Chapter 36-39. Yes. I will definitely bring it to him. Zhou Yan had long been scared out of his wits by Jun. He did not even realize that the shackles on his body had been released. Get lost, Zhuowen said indifferently. Zhou Yan came back to his senses. He glanced at Zhuowen, then ran out of the reception hall without looking back. The Ryuka in the valley had already received Zhuowen's telepathic message, so they did not stop Zhou Yan from leaving. Master Zhuo, this person is going to be let go just like that? Black King watched Zhou Yan disappear from the range of his telepathic message and said with some reluctance. If Yuan had not spoken, he would have already chased after Zhou Yan and killed him. A mere peak of the third blight will not affect our Star Wars. The reason I let him go was to let him pass on my words to the Divine Master. Zhuowen said indifferently. Black King and the others saw that Zhuowen had already said this, so they naturally did not dare to refute. Next, Zhuowen asked Black King if Taoist 3 purities had found anything that could weaken the blight. Black King answered truthfully that Taoist 3 purities did have some clues, but they were still searching. If they found anything, they would immediately send it to Zhuowen. After the two sides talked for a while, Black King took the initiative to leave. His purpose in coming down was not to see Zhuowen, but to guard the depths of Heaven's Moat. Before Black King and the others left, Zhuowen gave Black King an array flag. This array flag was the control array flag that he had set up on the border of Heaven's Moat. It could control the operation and state of the array. After the Black King obtained the array flag, he was filled with joy. To him, it could be said that it was a timely reign. For the next period of time, Zhuowen basically stayed in Ryuka to accompany Mu Chenxue and his family. He did not cultivate other than fusing with the 10,000 lotus in his divine soul. If he cultivated again now, he was afraid that he would not be able to suppress it, and the 5th blight would immediately descend. Until now, he still hadn't found anything that could weaken the blight tribulation, so how could he cultivate and break through? For this reason, he not only used the power of the Heaven Accessing Place and the Demon Saint Palace, but also issued many notices in the primitive heavenly domain and the Xianmi heavenly domain. The contents of the notice listed many types of items that could reduce the effects of the blight calamity, as well as extremely generous rewards. Furthermore, Zhuowen was different from the past. Legends about Zhuowen had already spread throughout the entire starry sky. It could be said that Zhuowen's name was now known by everyone. With the announcement in Zhuowen's name, all the cultivators in the starry skies did their best to help Zhuowen find items that could weaken the decayed tribulation. After leaving Ryuka, Curse Yen flew towards the heavenly moat. However, when he reached the starry sky border deep within the natural moat, he was blocked by a great formation. He did not need to think to know that this grand array should have been set up by Zhuowen. However, the strange thing was that the grand array seemed to know that he had reached the border and stopped automatically. Then, Curse Yen entered the chaotic starry sky. After Curse Yen left, the grand array closed again. Curse Yen found the original teleportation array. He took out a formation flag and activated the small teleportation array. His figure gradually disappeared. Through the teleportation array, Curse Yen returned to the golden corner starry sky. He went straight to the huge mechanical palace where the Divine Master was. When he entered the palace, there were already mechanical servants waiting for Curse Yen to bring him to the Divine Master in the depths of the palace. At this moment, in the center of the main hall in the depths of the palace, a round thunderball was suspended. The entire main hall was made of metal, and there were huge electronic screens suspended around it. It looked very high-tech. The Divine Master and the Great Divine Master stood side by side. They looked more like humans, but their skin was metallic silver. It was not like the skin color of normal humans at all. The Divine Master was a burly man. His body was wrapped in metal armor, and he carried a huge broad-bladed sword on his back. The Great Divine Master had no facial features. He wore a black cloak around his neck and stood quietly in place. At this moment, the two supreme rulers of the Golden Corner Starry Sky were standing respectfully behind two figures. They were a pair of young men, but their shapes were quite strange. They had a human face and a snake body. They were Gong Ji Lu and an IC, whom Zhuowen had met in the depths of the natural moat. Zhou Yan greets the two lords, the Lord God, and the great God Master. Curse Yen hurriedly knelt on the ground and said with an uneasy expression, Curse Yen, why did you suddenly come back? Didn't I ask you to investigate the movements of the wandering starry sky? Also, Lord Gong Ji Lu asked you to do something important. Have you finished it? The Divine Master said with a displeased expression when he saw Curse Yen return in a hurry. Curse Yen lowered his head and did not dare to look at Gong Ji Lu and the others. He said in a low voice, Lord Gong, this lowly one has let you down. The mission has failed. Gong Ji Lu smiled, but there was no other change in his expression. Instead, he said indifferently, Tell me in detail how you failed. Also, you should have found out who Desireless is. Curse Yen did not dare to hide anything and told him everything that had happened in the wandering starry sky. You mean in the end, you don't know the identity of Desireless? Gong Ji Lu frowned slightly and said with a little displeasure. Yes. Curse Yen had to bite the bullet. Humph. You really can't do anything right. Since you have been caught by the indigenous people over there, why did the indigenous people of the wandering starry sky let you go? Did you say something you shouldn't have said there? The Divine Master snorted coldly. No. The reason why the indigenous people let me go was mainly because they wanted me to bring a message to you, Lord Divine Master. Curse Yen said in fear. What message? The Divine Master asked. He said, No matter who it is, I will let the blood of those who dare to step into my territory stain the starry sky. Curse Yen repeated Zhuowen's words verbatim. The Divine Master was taken aback, then immediately laughed out loud and said, this person is really too arrogant. It's just a starry sky that has just been born not long ago, and its peak battle strength is only 2/5 blight cultivators. With this bit of strength, he still dares to say such words. There must be something wrong with his head. Gong Ji Lu's gaze was solemn, and he said solemnly, Golden Corner Divine Master, perhaps you still don't know one thing. Not long ago, the primordial chaos path appeared in the wandering starry sky. The Divine Master's smile immediately froze, and his eyes widened. He looked at Gong Ji Lu and said, Lord Gong, is this true? We saw it with our own eyes. Gong Ji Lu said solemnly. The primordial chaos path appeared? Could it be that a heaven-breaking realm powerhouse just happened to appear in the wandering starry sky at this time? How is this possible? It's too much of a coincidence. The Divine Master's expression became somewhat ugly. The overall strength of the wandering starry sky was much weaker than their Golden Corner starry sky. Therefore, the Divine Master seemed to have a card up his sleeve when it came to invading the wandering starry sky. He knew that as long as he sent troops, the wandering starry sky would be under his control. But now, there was an unforeseen event. Someone in the wandering starry sky actually successfully broke through the heavens. Then this was really difficult to handle. After all, a heaven-breaking realm powerhouse was sufficient to match a magnificent army. This battle already started to be disadvantageous to their Golden Corner starry sky. Chapter 3640. In the Godmaster's opinion, Gong Ji Lu and NIC's cultivation and combat power were much stronger than the guy who had just advanced to the Heavenbreaker realm. However, if the two of them entered the galaxy, they would definitely be at a disadvantage when facing the Heavenbreaker native. God Master Golden Corner, you don't have to worry so much. I have my own considerations. When your Golden Universe Starry Sky army enters the Wandering Starry Sky, I'll lend you my divine artifact, and then you can help me kill that Heavenbreaker native. You have to know that my divine weapon has reached the peak of Stage 2 Heavenbreaker. Gong Ji Lu said calmly. What? It's a Stage 2 Heavenbreaker divine weapon. The God Master was stunned at first, then he laughed and said gratefully, If Lord Gong is really willing to lend me your divine weapon, my Golden Corner Starry Sky will definitely win. God Master Golden Corner was very confident. He was an elite who was infinitely close to the Heavenbreaker realm, and with a Stage 2 Heavenbreaker divine weapon, it was more than enough to kill a cultivator who had just advanced to the Heavenbreaker realm. As long as God Master Golden Corner can do what you promised me, I'll naturally help you. Gong Ji Lu said with a smile. Don't worry, Lord Gong. Your business is my business. I'll definitely do it well. The god master knelt on one knee, his eyes filled with sincerity. With your words, God Master Golden Corner, that's enough. Let's go, now take me to see your large-scale teleportation formation. Although I haven't refined formations before, when I was in the 100 domains, I saw the process of many formation masters refining formations, so I might be able to see some of your formation's flaws. Gongji Lu laughed out loud. Follow me, Lord Gong. God Master Golden Corner stood up and respectfully led Gongji Lu into the depths. Oh right, this trash deserted the battle. I think it's a serious violation of military discipline, so he should be killed. Gongji Lu took a few steps, but the corner of his eyes fell on the dazed Curse Yen as he spoke calmly. You're right, Lord Gong. Golden Corner God Lord nodded and immediately said coldly, Men, drag Curse Yen down and behead him. 5 years later, in Ryuka's base, Jun sat on a futon in the middle of the room. A green glow surged between his eyebrows. This green light was like a spirit that was jumping around. Then, all of a sudden, the green light shot out from between his eyebrows and turned into numerous green lotuses. These green lotuses were not big, only the size of a pupil. They swarmed out and filled Zhuowen's room. After deducing for 5 years, I think it's time to try 10,000 lotuses return to 1. Zhuan calmly looked at the 10,000 green lotuses floating in the air. He took a deep breath and began to manipulate these green lotuses with his enormous soul power, causing them to approach and merge with each other. As the green lotuses continued to merge, a huge illusory image of a green lotus gradually appeared above Zhuowen's head. Zhuowen's face was getting paler and paler. Cold sweat had already appeared on his forehead and back. He did not expect that the process of fusing with the green lotus would be so painful. This pain was not physical pain, but the pain of the spirit and soul. It was as if his soul was burning on a raging fire. The pain was indescribable. Zhuan did not say a word and silently endured it. His soul was desperately trying to fuse with the surrounding green lotuses. As the green lotuses continued to merge, the illusory image of the green lotus above Zhuowen's head gradually solidified. 6 hours later, Zhuowen lay on the ground with a plop. He had finally completely fused with the last green lotus. But at the same time, Zhuan had also fainted. The pain of the soul and soul was too intense. Even though Zhuan had a strong will, he still fainted from the pain. When Zhuan fainted, the huge green lotus formed by 10,000 lotuses returned to 1 quietly floated above Zhuan. This huge green lotus slowly bloomed in the air. When the green lotus completely bloomed, a cluster of green flames quietly burned in the center of the green lotus. This cluster of green flames slowly drifted out and then entered between Zhuowen's eyebrows. After the green flame left, the huge blooming green lotus floating in the air began to wither and dim. In the end, it disappeared. After that cluster of green flames entered Zhuowen's soul, it caused a sea of green flames that enveloped his entire soul. However, this blue sea of fire was not meant to destroy the divine soul, but to transform the divine soul. In the raging sea of green flames, Zhuowen's soul was rapidly transforming and evolving. Finally, an extremely terrifying aura burst out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows. This aura was invisible and intangible, but in the pavilion where Zhuan was located, all the living beings within a radius of who knew how many kilometers felt as if their souls were being heavily squeezed. It was as if some kind of invisible hand was pinching their souls and constantly rubbing them. It was very uncomfortable. Everyone in Ryuka felt the throbbing of their souls. They came out one after another and couldn't help but look at the pavilion where Zhuan was. However, there was an exception in Ryuka, and that was Moyan Wushang's room. Only Moyan Wushang's room was very quiet. No one came out from it, as if he didn't feel the throbbing of his soul. What a powerful soul fluctuation! It seems that my husband's soul has made new progress. Mu Chenxue came out of the main hall with the help of Feng Xiao. She looked in the direction of Zhuowen's room and muttered in a low voice. Now, Mu Chenxue's belly was bulging more and more, but it still couldn't hide her beautiful face and graceful figure. This Zhuowen is really too much. Recently, he has been coming out less and less to accompany you. He is in seclusion every day. Feng Xiao complained. Mu Chenxue said with a smile, "Grandma, don't blame my husband. We don't know when the army of the Golden Corner's starry sky will invade. My husband is also very worried, so he is working so hard to cultivate. He is doing this for our family." Feng Xiao kindly said, "My Chenxue is still the most sensible. That Bratwen can marry you. It is really his good fortune from his previous life. I am also afraid that he will be too tired. I am not complaining about him, but I am complaining that he doesn't know how to cherish his body." Mu Chenxue smiled and looked at Zhuowen's pavilion with her beautiful eyes. She didn't plan to disturb Zhuowen. She knew that if Zhuowen came out of seclusion, he would naturally inform them. Now that they haven't been notified, they naturally wouldn't disturb Zhuowen, so as not to distract Zhuowen. 3 days later, Yun slowly opened his eyes, sat up, and pressed his forehead with his right hand. Until now, his head was still aching as if someone had hammered it. My soul has broken through? Chapter 3641. Within Zhuowen's spirit, there were 9 spirit sword essences floating quietly. Originally, there was nothing strange about this, but what was strange was that the surface of the 9 spirit sword essences was covered in green flames. The green flames danced on the surface of the spirit sword essences, forming the appearance of green lotuses blooming one after another. Zhuowen could sense that his spirit had indeed transformed and evolved again. It was now unbelievably powerful. But he never expected that the spirit sword essences would also mutate. He could feel that the green lotus flames on the surface of the spirit sword essences were absolutely extraordinary. Let's test its power. Zhuowen stood up. With a thought, he entered the macro world. As Zhuowen's strength continued to improve, the macro world became more and more perfect, and the barrier of the macro world became more and more solid. Moreover, the primordial technique was also very magical. Every time he cultivated the primordial technique, this technique could communicate with the macro world on its own and use the energy improved by the primordial technique to transform the macro world. It was precisely because of this effect that the big world had changed a lot over time. It was much stronger than before, and the strength of its world barrier was no weaker than the strength of the boundary of Wander Starry Sky where Zhuowen was. Moreover, Zhuowen believed that as his cultivation continued to improve, his macro world would only become more and more perfect. He was looking forward to what the macro world would look like when he reached the peak of his cultivation. Zhuowen came to a barren area and landed on a heavily weathered boulder. He sat cross-legged and pointed the sword finger of his right hand between his eyebrows. A blazing golden light surged between his eyebrows, and this golden light was mixed with a trace of green light. A terrifying sword essence swept out from between his eyebrows, and a divine sword flew out. The divine sword shone with golden light, and the strange thing was that the surface of the sword was covered in green lotus flames. Bang! The divine sword leaped into the sky, stirring up the wind and clouds, and then rushed straight down. Finally, the tip of the sword stabbed into the ground in the middle of the barren land. Just like this, the divine sword stabbed into the barren land. Then, a terrifying sword chi suddenly spread out from the divine sword. Accompanying this sword chi was the green lotus flame that spread out in a ring like an endless tide. In an instant, the entire wasteland was enveloped by the green lotus fire, turning into a sea of fire. Zhuowen could clearly feel that the entire world was trembling, and the vast wasteland enveloped by the sea of fire was actually sinking. This wasteland was actually burned into a huge crater by the flames. Moreover, this huge crater was still forming at an extremely fast speed, and it was spreading towards the depths of the ground as if it was going to burn through this piece of land. Zhuowen waved his sleeve, and the divine sword that was stuck in the center of the wasteland flew out and returned to his spirit. As for the surrounding green lotus fire, it was as if it had lost its backbone after the divine sword disappeared and started to disperse. Zhuowen floated in the air and looked down at the area where the green lotus fire had disappeared. What he saw was no longer a desert, but an unimaginably large abyss. The abyss was too deep and bottomless, as if there was no end to it. What a terrifying power! Zhuowen sucked in a breath of cold air. One had to know that the spiritual sword intent he released just now was only 10% of its power. He originally thought that the spiritual sword intent condensed from 10% of the power of his spirit wouldn't cause too much of a commotion. However, he didn't expect that the commotion it created would far exceed Zhuowen's imagination. If he used 100% of the power of his spirit, Yuan even doubted that his world would be able to withstand the green lotus fire that seemed to have come from hell. Perhaps the complete form of the green lotus fire would be able to burn the entire world into nothingness in an instant. The complete form of this technique definitely can't be used in spiraling the galaxy. Zhuan took a deep breath, and only then did he slightly calm the complicated emotions in his heart. The current spiritual sword intent was really too terrifying. If he really used it at full strength, he was afraid that spiraling the galaxy would be destroyed by him. However, he also knew that the spiritual sword intent unleashed from 10% of the power of his spirit was enough to obliterate any living being below the heaven-crushing stage. Even cultivators at the heaven-crushing first transformation stage would have difficulty resisting it. In the future, I'll divide the spiritual sword intent into 10 levels. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I definitely won't use the 10 levels of spiritual sword intent. Zhuan muttered to himself. Of the 10 levels of spiritual sword intent, each level corresponded to 10% of the power of his spirit. For example, the first level of spiritual sword intent was condensed from 10% of the power of his spirit by Zhuan, and its power was considered the weakest. The 10 levels of spiritual sword intent were naturally condensed from all the power of his spirit, and it was also one of Zhuowen's most powerful techniques at the moment. After leaving the Great World, Yuan received a message from Long Xiaolun. According to him, an item that could weaken the Blight Tribulation had been found at the Sanqing Street, and it had already been sent to Ryuka. Since it was sent from the Sanqing Street, it should be very likely that it's the real deal. Zhuan thought for a moment before opening the door and heading to the reception hall. During the past 5 or 6 years, Zhuan had been stationed in Ryuka, and after his announcement had spread to every corner of the galaxy, Ryuka had become very lively. Every day, many cultivators would rush to Ryuka to announce that they had found something that could weaken the Blight Tribulation. However, the items that Ryuka received were basically all fake, and they were all returned. After many cultivators were refused entry, they no longer cared about the announcements in Ryuka, and the number of cultivators who came to Ryuka to claim credit gradually decreased. In the end, everything returned to normal. When Zhuan arrived at the reception hall, he saw a man in a green robe standing silently with a brocade box in his hand. Long Xiaolun was standing not far away from the man, and he was conversing with the man in green robes in a low voice. Zhuowen's arrival also attracted the two's attention. "You're here. You two talk first, I have something to do, so I'll take my leave." Long Xiaotian patted Zhuowen's shoulder and left the reception hall. "You're from the Palace of Three Pristines?" Zhuan sized up the man in front of him. He was wearing the Taoist robes of the Palace of Three Pristines, but he had never seen him before. "I'm Chen Zong, a new disciple of my master," Chen Zong said respectfully. However, Yuan noticed that Chen Zong looked at him with a hint of fanaticism and worship. Zhuowen was already used to this kind of expression. The members of the Long family and many other human cultivators all looked at him with the same expression. After all, after he defeated Bing Hui, the entire galaxy was filled with rumors about him, and the more they spread, the more ridiculous they became. Zhuan had become a legend in the galaxy, the uncrowned king in everyone's hearts. "Thank you for making this trip." Zhuowen's gaze fell on the brocade box in Chen Zong's hand. "I almost forgot, my master told me to hand this to you personally, Master Zhuo." Chen Zong quickly handed the brocade box to Zhuowen with a solemn expression, as if it was a handover ceremony. Zhuowen was speechless at Chen Zong's serious expression. Chapter 3642. This is a dark stone. It's an extremely rare item in the cosmos. According to the records, dark stones have only appeared a dozen or so times in the history of the cosmos. Master spent a great deal of effort to find this dark stone in a secret realm. Master was even injured because of it, Chin Chin said. Zhuan put away the brocade box, then took out a jade slip and handed it to Chen Zong. "The information recorded in this jade slip will be very useful to your master. Give this to him and treat it as his reward for finding the dark stone. Zhuan said. Chen Zong hurriedly waved his hands in refusal, but under Zhuan's insistence, he finally put the jade slip away. I won't disturb you any further, Lord Zhua. Farewell. Chen Zong stood up, bowed deeply to Zhuan, then left the guest hall. Zhuan silently watched Chen Zong leave. The jade slip he'd given him contained a cultivation technique, the extreme purple spirit art. He'd obtained it from the owner of the golden coffin. The extreme purple spirit art was a heaven-breaching technique. Although it wasn't a very high level among heaven-breaching techniques, it was still very powerful. Although it wasn't very high in the cosmos, any heaven-breaker cultivation technique was something that could only be found through luck. Taoist 3 Purities talent was already quite terrifying, but he'd been split off from Wanyo's body and was affected by it. If he'd been able to assimilate Zhuowen's Pangu's sacred body, he would have had a very good chance of breaking through the cosmos. However, there was another way. Cultivating a heaven-breaker cultivation technique was a shortcut to breaking through the cosmos. Zhuan believed that with the extreme purple spirit art, Taoist 3 Purities would be able to break through the cosmos in tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years. In addition, Zhuan didn't care that Taoist 3 Purities would attack the Ryuka once he did. He knew that Taoist 3 Purities was a smart person. If he dared to attack the Ryuka, then Zhuan would kill him even if he had to go to the heavens. Taoist 3 Purities wouldn't make such an enemy for himself. Of course, the purple extreme spiritual art that Zhuan gave Chen Zong was not the original, but a copy. The real original was in the Ryuka library. Once someone in Ryuka reached the peak of the 5th blight, they would be able to practice the extreme purple spiritual art and shorten the time needed to break the heavens. After obtaining the darkest stone, Zhuan did not immediately cultivate and break through. He was still waiting for news from the demon's Saint Palace. He was fully aware of the terror of the 5th blight. One darkest stone was not enough. He needed something that could weaken the blight. Donghuang Tai had already sent him a message some time ago. Regarding the item that could weaken the blight calamity, he already had some ideas. Zhuan knew that the Demon Saint Palace should be coming soon. Over the next few months, Zhuan neither went into seclusion nor cultivated. He spent most of his time with his family. He looked at Mu Qinshue's belly, which was bulging day by day. He knew that he was going to be a father soon, and an inexplicable feeling sprouted in his heart. He had never experienced this feeling before. It was a mixture of excitement, fear, and curiosity. Finally, half a year later, someone from the Demon's Saint Palace arrived. Zhuan personally went to welcome them, because the one who had come to Ryuka this time was the Demon's Saint Donghuang Tai. Many people in Ryuka knew of the Demon Saint's reputation, and a grand welcoming party was held. All of Ryuka was mobilized, and the place was bustling with noise and excitement. Donghuang Tai had brought Yun the Rainbow Divine Spring. Only 7 drops of spring water would flow out of this divine spring every million years. Each drop of spring water had a different color, forming 7 different colors. This was how the Rainbow Divine Spring got its name. It was said that after consuming the Rainbow Divine Spring, one's body would become extremely resistant. When Wu Taiji and Taoist 3 Purities had reached the 5th blight, they had found a drop of the Rainbow Divine Spring and successfully passed the 5th blight. Donghuang Tai had brought 7 drops of the Rainbow Divine Spring to Zhuan, and 7 drops of the Rainbow Divine Spring at that. Zhuan didn't let Donghuang Tai get the short end of the stick, and gave him a 7 lives recovery pill. In terms of value, the 7 lives recovery pill was a bit more valuable than the Rainbow Divine Spring. However, the Rainbow Divine Spring was something Zhuan needed. In his eyes, the Rainbow Divine Spring was far more valuable than the 7 lives recovery pill. Donghuang Tai was naturally overjoyed. He had already tested the effects of the 7 lives recovery pill, and it was surprisingly effective. He had diluted the 7 lives recovery pill in a total of 108 bottles of divine water, and even after diluting the pill, Donghuang Tai's cultivation speed increased by who knew how many times. Fortunately, Donghuang Tai didn't tell Zhuan the truth. If Zhuan were to find out that this guy was using the 7 lives recovery pill to cultivate, it would be like using a sledgehammer to kill a chicken. The 7 Lives recovery pill's main effect was recovery and healing, but this guy was using it for cultivation. Dong Huang Tai stayed in Ryuka for a few days. During this time, he also chatted a lot with Mu Chenxue and said that the position of the Holy Lady of the Demon Saint Palace had always been reserved for Mu Chenxue. After Dong Huang Tai left, Mu Chenxue was a little reluctant to part with him. After all, Dong Huang Tai was not only her savior, but he had also treated her well all these years, and treated her like his own daughter. The relationship between the two was like that of a father and daughter. Hubby, after you get the Rainbow Divine Spring and the Stone of Utmost Darkness, do you plan to break through during this period? Mu Chenxue leaned on Zhuan and asked. Zhuan shook his head and said, after our child is born, I will go through the tribulation. Moreover, there is still no news from Green Hat and Purple Star Lord. I am not in a hurry to go through the tribulation. Aside from the 3 clear streets and the Demon Saint Palace, Zhuan also sent Purple Star Lord and Green Hat to search the Xianmi Heavenly Realm and the Primitive Heavenly Realm. Zhuan had already set a deadline for the 2 of them. They had to return to Ryuka before his child was born. Zhuan was very cautious. It would be best if he could find something to weaken his blight tribulation. After all, his blight tribulation had already exceeded the threshold of the half-step heaven-crushing stage, so it was worth it to make more preparations. Time flew by, and another 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, everyone in Ryuka was extremely nervous. Most of the Ryuka people were gathered outside a pavilion. This pavilion was the one that Zhuan and Mu Chenxue resided in. At this moment, Zhuan, Long Xiaotian, Feng Shiyao, and the other Ryuka family members were all waiting anxiously in the courtyard of the pavilion. Zhuan was pacing back and forth with a solemn expression. He was in a complete mess. Today is the day that Chenxue will give birth. We've already found the best midwife in the Xianmi Heavenly Realm, so Chenxue should be fine. You don't have to worry too much. When Long Xiaotian and Feng Xiao saw Zhuan's anxious and uneasy appearance, they both opened their mouths to persuade him. Zhuan stopped in his tracks and heaved a faint sigh as he tried to calm the anxiety in his heart. Even though there was no danger in giving birth to a child at Mu Chenxue's level, Zhuan still couldn't help but feel a mixture of worry, excitement, and anticipation. All of a sudden, the entire valley began to tremor. Immediately afterward, a beam of golden light erupted from the pavilion, transforming into a golden pillar of light that shot into the sky. Then, the clouds in the sky began to swirl as if they had been pierced through by the pillar of light. Immediately afterward, the roars of dragons and cries of phoenixes appeared out of thin air, creating an extremely extraordinary phenomenon. All of Ryuka, as well as all of the nearby cultivators, looked up at the phenomenon in the sky with different expressions. They were all stunned. Following the rare phenomenon, the cries of a baby could be heard, grabbing everyone's attention. Chapter 3643. When the midwife's voice came from the room, Yun, who was waiting outside the room, let out a sigh of relief and smiled. Brother Zhua, congratulations. Lu Hantian and Wu Dai quickly came forward to congratulate Shui Yifeng. At the same time, the higher-ups of Ryuka also congratulated Zhuan. They were happy for Zhuan. What are you waiting for? Go in. Feng Xiao pushed Zhuan, which woke up Zhuan, who was still in a daze. Good. I'll go in now. Zhuan chuckled as he opened the door and entered the room alone. In the antique room, there was a rather pleasant smell of sandalwood floating in the air. At this moment in the room, several maids were busy pouring water, holding towels, and so on. Beside the bed, an old woman with white hair was holding a crying baby in her arms. She looked at the baby with a kind expression. Master Zhua, you are here. The young master is very healthy, and he was born with a natural phenomenon. His aura is comparable to that of a sage. His future is limitless. When the old woman saw Zhuan, she gently handed the baby in her arms to Zhuan. Miraculously, when the baby was handed over to Zhuan, the baby's cries stopped. The baby looked at Zhuan curiously with his beautiful eyes and smiled. A pair of small hands reached out to Zhuan's face and gently stroked Zhuan's cheeks. The midwife and her maids were startled. The midwife quickly congratulated Zhuo Yifeng. Master Zhuo, it seems that the young master has recognized you as his closest relative. The young master's wisdom is extraordinary when he was just born. I am ashamed of my inferiority. Midwife, thank you for your hard work. Go out and report to my father that we have already prepared the reward that we promised you in advance. Zhuowen said with a smile. The midwife looked very excited. She bowed to Zhuowen and hurried out of the room. Ryuka had given her a generous reward this time. Even she couldn't keep her composure. She couldn't suppress the excitement in her heart. Zhuowen dismissed the maidservants in the room, leaving only Mu Qinshue's personal maidservant, Hongyu. He then sat by the bed and looked at Mu Qinsue, who had her eyes slightly closed. At this moment, Mu Qinsue was probably too tired and had fallen into a deep sleep. Zhuowen grabbed Mu Qinshue's jade-like hand and slowly transferred the energy in his body to Mu Qinsue. Although the destructive power of the shattered divine power was terrifying under Zhuowen's deliberate control, the gradual infusion of the shattered divine power into Mu Qinshue's body was a kind of holy medicine for healing injuries. As for the baby in Zhuowen's left hand, he opened his eyes wide and looked at Zhuowen and Mu Qinsue curiously. He was Zhuowen's son and had inherited the powerful bloodline that Zhuowen had cultivated for many years. He was born with high intelligence, so naturally he could recognize the man and woman in front of him. They were his biological parents. Mu Qinshue's eyelashes slightly moved and she opened her eyes. Husband, where's our child? Mu Qinsue was a little confused. She looked at Zhuowen's face and muttered in a low voice. Zhuowen handed the baby in his hand to Mu Qinsue and said with a smile, Qinsue, our child is very healthy and very cute. The baby was very smart. When Zhuowen handed him to Mu Qinsue, he immediately stretched out a pair of white lotus root-like hands, as if he wanted to be hugged. Mu Qinsue sat up and took the baby. Tears flowed out of the corners of her eyes and she said with tears of joy, I finally gave birth to you, my child. Seeing this scene, Yuan also sighed in his heart. 10 years was not a long time for cultivators. It passed in the blink of an eye. But for Mu Qinsue, who had been pregnant for 10 years, it seemed extremely long. Husband, what do you think we should name him? Mu Qinsue looked at Zhuowen. Her eyes were as gentle as water and her face was filled with happiness. Zhuowen scratched his head and said with some embarrassment, Naming is not my strong point. How about this? I'll let father and mother come in and let them give their opinions. With that, Yuan hurriedly left the room. Mu Qinsue saw Zhuowen's flustered look and couldn't help but smile. She also didn't expect that her husband, who was usually mature and calm in the face of danger, would actually behave so childishly at this time. This was the first time she saw this side of Zhuowen. Not long after Zhuowen left, Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiao, Lu Hantian and several other good friends of Zhuowen followed Zhuowen into the inner room. They first asked about Mu Qinshue's health, then walked to the hall and discussed the name. Finally, after a long debate, everyone finally reached a consensus. The child's name will be Junin. And he is a Ryuka, so his surname will naturally be Long. Of course, his surname can also be Zhuo. Our Ryuka is also a Zhuo family, so both surnames are very important to our family. Long Xiaotian laughed and said, tracing back to their roots, their surname was Long, and the surname Zhuo was hidden to avoid being hunted down. Whether it was the surname Zhuo or Long, Ryuka recognized both surnames. In Ryuka, Yuan could be called Zhuowen or Longwen. It's just that Yuan was used to his original name, so most of the time, he preferred others to call him Zhuowen. Let's call him Zhuojunin. Jun means you, which is this child, and means peace. Zhuojun and means peace. Zhuojun and means peace. No matter what happens in the future, Zhuojun in hopes that this child will be safe and sound. This is the blessing of us elders for him. Zhuojunin. What a good name. Mu Qinsue smiled and immediately raised the baby with both hands and said gently, from now on, your name will be Zhuojunin. Little Junin giggled as if he understood Mu Qinshue's words and was very satisfied with the name. That night, Ryuka held a grand banquet to celebrate the birth of little Junin. At the banquet, everyone attended except for one person. Is Wushang still in seclusion? During the banquet, Yuan asked the servants in Moyan Wushang's house. He learned that Moyan Wushang had been in seclusion all these years and had not stepped out of the house. No one paid much attention to this matter, but Juan felt that something was wrong. After the banquet ended, everyone dispersed. After settling down Mu Chenxue and the child, Yuan went straight to Moyan Wushang's house. "Zhuo Daren." At the entrance of Moyan Wushang's house, the two guards saw Yuan and quickly knelt on the ground to salute him. Their eyes revealed a fanatical look. "I'm here to look for Wushang," Zhuan said with a smile. The two guards readily allowed Zhuan to enter the house. One of the guards even reminded Zhuan that ever since Moyan Wushang came out of seclusion, he had not come out, and there was no movement in the house. Chapter 3644. After Zhuan entered the house, his spirit sense radiated out like a fan. Suddenly, every blade of grass and every tree in Mo Yen Wushang's house appeared in Zhuowen's spirit sense. But what surprised Zhuan was that he did not see Moyan Wushang in the house. In the whole house, other than the two guards at the door, there was no other living thing. What's going on? Zhuowen's eyes became serious. He was sure that Moyan Wushang had not left the Ryuka camp. This was because he had set up many large arrays in the valley where the Ryuka camp was located. There were even many large surveillance arrays. He was very clear about the comings and goings of the Ryuka people. If Moyan Wushang had secretly left, he would not have been able to escape his eyes. So he was sure that Moyan Wushang had not left the Ryuka. When Zhuan approached the door of the room, he was blocked by a ripple of array. This array was not a high-level array. It should have been set up by Moyan Wushang. From the traces of the array, one could see that it had not been closed at all. Obviously, after Moyan Wushang had set up this array, he had not left the room at all. Bang! Zhuan easily tore the array, opened the door, and entered the dark room. He searched around, but there was no one in the room. He even checked the remote parts of the room, but there was no secret passage. Zhuowen's eyes showed a trace of surprise. From the various traces, he could see that Moyan Wushang seemed to have disappeared from the world. But how could this be? Zhuan came to Moyan Wushang's bedside. The bed was very tidy, but because it had not been used for a long time, it was covered with dust. Zhuan took the pillow and saw a bead and a jade slip under the pillow. The bead was crystal clear. In the middle of the bead, there was a trace of fog. In the faintly discernible fog, Zhuowen discovered something that looked like a passageway. The first end of the passage was connected to the fog, while the other end was pitch black. No one knew where it led to. Zhuan looked at the jade scroll and found that the contents of the jade scroll were written by Moyan Wushang himself. After reading the contents of the jade slip, Zhuowen's gaze once again fell on the bead in his hand, and his expression became extremely solemn. In the jade slip, Moyan Wushang explained very clearly that this pearl was called the Merciless and Desireless Pearl. The Merciless Pearl was an extremely famous pearl within the Nuwa clan. This was because within the Merciless Desireless Pearl, there was a terrifying trial to become a true merciless desireless person. Once he passed through the trial within the pearl, he would obtain the truly powerful strength of merciless desireless. Moreover, it was said that this trial was not really about severing the 7 emotions and 6 desires, but the price was very high because the trial inside the bead was extremely dangerous. Throughout the history of the Nuwa clan, all of the geniuses who had entered the pearl had perished. Not a single one of them had succeeded. It was precisely because the merciless and desireless pearl had an almost 100% failure rate that the Nuwa clan did not plan on using it to cultivate merciless desireless person. Instead, they used a simple and crude method to cultivate merciless desireless person by severing the 7 emotions and 6 desires. This was why the Nuwa clan sent many cultivators to the starry skies of the lower realms to select suitable candidates for merciless desireless person to experiment on. Although the failure rate of the merciless and desireless person plan was very high, at least it had a certain success rate. This also allowed the Nuwa clan to cultivate some merciless and desireless person. It was precisely because of the success of the merciless and desireless person plan that the merciless and desireless pearl was ultimately abandoned by the Nuwa clan. Later on, for some unknown reason, it fell into the hands of Luo Hong. Although Luo Hong did not plan on using the merciless and desireless pearl, she did not plan on throwing it away either. Instead, she kept it. After all, this pearl had an extremely long history within the Nuwa clan, and she could not bear to throw it away. In the end, after Luo Hong joined Moyen Wushang, the merciless and desireless pearl also fell into his hands. Moyen Wushang was already very disgusted by the merciless and desireless person plan, so he naturally had no feelings towards the merciless and desireless pearl. Later on, however, after Moyen Wushang was rescued by Zhuowen multiple times, he deeply understood his own inadequacy and helplessness. In the end, she decided to use the merciless and desireless pearl in order to not become a burden to Zhuowen and in order to be able to help Zhuowen in the future. She had long since heard from Luo Hong that the power of merciless and desireless within the merciless and desireless pearl was the most orthodox and also the most powerful. However, the trials within the merciless and desireless pearl were simply too terrifying. The failure rate was 100%, and countless geniuses of the Nuwa clan had died. It was only in the end that the Nuwa clan had abandoned it. Zhuowen crushed the jade slip, his gaze growing increasingly gloomy. Moyen Wushang had clearly stated in the jade slip that she had been in seclusion all these years because she had been undergoing trials within the merciless and desireless pearl. How could Wushang be so stupid? This merciless and desireless pearl is so dangerous, but she still wants to go in and undergo trials. Yuan clenched his fists, his face filled with a sigh. He picked up the pearl, silently staring at the mist-covered tunnel within the pearl. I have to go in and take a look. Zhuowen's expression was resolute. He knew that he couldn't just leave Wushang alone. Although he didn't know the exact situation of Wushang, he had to see her if she was alive or dead. He had to enter the pearl to find her. However, Yuan didn't immediately enter the pearl. He knew that the inside of the bead was full of danger, so before entering the bead, he had to be fully prepared. The next day, Green Hat and Purple Star Lord finally returned. Although the two of them were a little later than the agreed time, Yuan didn't blame them. This was because the two of them had finally found something that met Zhuowen's requirements after much effort. Zhuowen looked at a stalk of grass that was overflowing with spiritual qi in the brocade box. The shape of the grass was very strange. It actually looked like a divine sword. Moreover, although the grass was lying quietly in the brocade box, the moment Zhuowen's gaze fell on the grass, he felt as if he saw countless divine swords flying through the air, giving him the illusion that 10,000 swords were piercing through his heart. Is this the sword heart grass? Zhuowen closed the brocade box and revealed a gentle smile. The sword heart grass also had the effect of weakening the decay tribulation. Its effect was not inferior to the 7-colored divine spring and the darkest stone. Moreover, the sword heart grass was more valuable and precious than the 7-colored divine spring and the darkest stone. Green Hat and Purple Star Lord naturally went through a lot of hardships to find the sword heart grass. They paid an unknown price and even narrowly escaped death several times. Thank you for your hard work. This is the 7 Lives Qi Recovery Pill. Take it as a reward for your hard work. Zhuowen was very satisfied. He immediately took out 2 7 Lives Qi Recovery Pills and gave them to Green Hat and Purple Star Lord. The moment the two of them saw the 7 Lives Qi Recovery Pill, their eyes lit up. They had long heard that Zhuowen had a heaven-breaking divine pill. Although it was a healing divine pill, it was said that it had unimaginable benefits for cultivation. This time, Yuan gave them the divine pill that they had been looking forward to for a long time. Naturally, the two of them wouldn't be polite. They quickly put away the divine pill and thanked Zhuowen with smiles on their faces. After obtaining the sword heart grass, Zhuowen gathered everyone in Ryuka and informed them that he would be leaving Ryuka for a period of time today. He planned to go through the 5th decay tribulation. Then he personally bid farewell to Long Xiaotian, Feng Xiyao, Mu Chenxue and his son. Chapter 3645. A stream of light shot out from the border of the heaven-accessing secret realm, instantly leaving the border and entering the vast chaotic starry sky. The flowing light faded away, revealing a young man with a rather delicate appearance. This young man was Zhuowen. After leaving Ryuka, he came all the way to the heaven-accessing secret realm and entered the chaotic starry sky through the heaven-accessing secret realm. It had to be said that the pressure in the chaotic starry sky was really terrifying. Back then, Zhuowen's cultivation was not high enough, so he went out once. It could be said that he was extremely embarrassed by the pressure in the chaotic starry sky. But now, it was much better, but he also felt as if his whole body was filled with lead. If it weren't for his strength being much stronger than ordinary half-step breaking heaven realm experts, his movements would have become very slow in the chaotic starry sky. Zhuan knew that his fifth blight tribulation would be much stronger than the fourth blight, and its power might exceed the limit of this starry sky. So, when he planned to go through the fifth blight tribulation, he had already chosen the place to go through it. Naturally, it was the chaotic starry sky. The chaotic starry sky was all-encompassing, and it was far more vast than he had imagined. No matter how powerful his blight tribulation was, it probably wouldn't have any effect on the chaotic starry sky. Zhuowen landed on a piece of dark rock. This rock was huge, no less than the size of an ordinary life planet. This was the closest rock to the border of the heaven-accessing secret realm. On the surface, this rock looked no different from the meteorites in the heaven-accessing secret realm. However, Zhuowen knew that these shattered rocks were far harder than any meteor in the lower realm's starry skies. Even a full blow from a fifth blight expert would probably only leave a palm-sized mark on this rock, and it wouldn't be able to shatter the entire rock. Zhuowen knew that the material structure of the chaotic starry sky was far more advanced and stable than the material in the lower world. As a result, anything formed in the chaotic cosmos was much tougher than the cosmos of the lower realms. This was also why breaking heaven realm cultivators were already invincible in the lower world, but in the chaotic starry sky, there was a risk of death at any time. The chaotic starry skies were far more threatening than the starry skies of the lower realms, and the living beings that could survive in the chaotic starry skies were all formidable monsters. Zhuowen took out the darkest stone, the rainbow divine spring, and the sword heartgrass. After that, he took out a praying mat and sat down cross-legged. He silently breathed in and out, constantly adjusting his condition. When Zhuowen felt that his condition was more or less adjusted, he slowly stood up. His eyes shone with a radiance that was hard to look at. "Let's start," Zhuowen muttered to himself. Soon after, an extremely terrifying energy began to surge within his body. This energy was like a mist that instantly dissipated and swept towards the depths of the chaotic starry sky. It was like some kind of bait that was luring some kind of terrifying energy from the depths of the starry sky. Boom, boom. Suddenly, two black holes appeared around Zhuowen, who was sitting cross-legged on the rock. What? The moment Zhuowen saw the two black holes, his pupils involuntarily shrank. He had experienced 4 blight tribulations, and the energy of each blight tribulation basically came from the black holes formed in the depths of the starry sky. And the energy of each blight tribulation that came from the black holes was exceptionally terrifying. And there was always only one black hole. But now, there were 2 black holes, and each black hole gave Zhuowen a feeling of danger. Boom, boom. However, Zhuowen didn't have time to think about it, because in the 2 black holes, there was a blazing red light surging. Immediately, red lotuses fell from the depths of the black holes one after another. The surface of these red lotuses burned with fiery red flames, but the surface was filled with a terrifying aura of destruction. It was the Annihilation Red Lotus that had caused Bing Hui to be in an extremely difficult situation. Although Zhuowen had already expected it, the moment he saw the Annihilation Red Lotus, his expression didn't look too good. Back then, his cultivation was only at the peak of the 3rd blight, but he didn't dare to touch the Annihilation Red Lotus at all. He had to hide in the golden coffin to barely escape the calamity. But this time, he wouldn't hide anymore. His cultivation had already advanced to the peak of the 4th blight, and his strength had already undergone a transformation. He wanted to try and see if he had the qualifications to resist the Annihilation Red Lotus with his current strength. Zhuowen began to circulate the primordial chant at high speed, and all the apertures on his body were erupting with purple energy. His eyes were dyed purple, and his black hair instantly turned purple and crazily grew to his waist. Boom! Zhuan punched out, blasting the first annihilation red lotus into countless sparks. But at the same time, a burning smell came from Zhuowen's fist. Zhuowen's eyes were solemn. It seemed that he still underestimated the power of the annihilation red lotus. His cultivation was more than several times stronger than before, and the primordial chant had doubled his strength, but he was injured just by dealing with one annihilation red lotus. Although it was only a minor injury, it was an indisputable fact that he was injured. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. After Zhuowen destroyed the first annihilation red lotus, one after another annihilation red lotus fell from the sky, almost drowning Zhuowen. Primordial purple snow. Zhuowen stomped his right foot, and his entire body transformed into an illusory purple shadow. The destructive red lotuses that blotted out the sky and covered the earth could not capture Zhuowen's figure at all. At the same time, purple snow began to fall from the sky. The purple snow had a bone-chilling coldness. The moment it came into contact with the annihilation red lotus, the intense coldness began to gradually weaken the power of the annihilation red lotus. Although the annihilation red lotus's aura was still terrifying, the flames burning on its surface gradually weakened. Primordial life breaker. The moment Zhuowen dodged the first wave of annihilation red lotus, he used life breaker. In the void behind him, a huge purple river gushed out and instantly drowned the annihilation red lotus below. The result surprised Zhuowen. The purple river seemed to be a natural counter to the annihilation red lotus, extinguishing the flames of the annihilation red lotus. Although the number of annihilation red lotuses increased, it was like a continuous downpour. However, Zhuowen relied on the seamless combination of primordial purple snow and primordial life annihilation to barely cope with it. When Zhuowen destroyed the last annihilation red lotus, the two black holes above stopped moving, as if they were brewing some kind of stronger energy. Zhuowen didn't dare to be negligent. He touched his waist. Chapter 3646. Bush, bush, bush. Suddenly, dense white lights shot out from the two black holes. These white lights were like snowflakes, covering Zhuowen's field of vision. They came from all directions, completely sealing off all of Zhuowen's escape routes. Zhuowen was like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, silently waiting for these white lights to approach. Hongmeng flying blade. When countless bone spurs suddenly approached Zhuowen, a strange purple saber appeared around him. The purple saber was ethereal and traceless. In an instant, it changed hundreds of positions around Zhuowen, forming a strong defense around him. Bang, bang, bang. Suddenly, sparks flew around Zhuowen. The bone spurs and the purple saber intertwined, creating blazing sparks. At the same time, purple snow and life severing came out in full force. They used offense as defense, forming an impenetrable defense around Zhuowen. What made Zhuowen sigh in relief was that although there were many bone spurs rushing out from the black holes, their power seemed to be relatively average. The defensive barrier formed by the three abilities was able to withstand the barrage of bone spikes. These bone spurs seemed to be weaker than the red lotus of destruction. Zhuowen muttered to himself in surprise. However, as soon as his voice fell, the surrounding bone spurs suddenly stopped attacking. Immediately, Zhuowen was surprised to find that the bone spurs began to gather in the sky. Countless bone spurs merged and finally condensed into a huge bone dragon. This bone dragon was thousands of meters long. The surface of its white bones was constantly flickering with mysterious and strange runes. In the bone dragon's huge eye sockets, a cluster of green flames burned. That cluster of flames seemed to have a life of its own as it constantly jumped about. At the same time, it stared coldly at Zhuowen. The huge bone wings on the bone dragon's back spread out. Immediately, it fell vertically toward Zhuowen like a comet. Boom! When it got close to Zhuowen, the bone dragon's huge bone wings suddenly swept out, and the three great divine abilities surrounding Zhuowen were all broken. Zhuowen groaned and retreated in the starry sky. After retreating hundreds of kilometers, he suddenly stepped on the void. Powerful energy turned into a circular ripple under his feet. He relied on the power of the shock wave to barely stabilize his body. So strong, Zhuowen looked at the bone dragon in front of him with a gloomy face. He knew that the bone dragon was the true face of the bone spurs. Its power was indeed much more terrifying than the red lotus of destruction. The bone dragon roared and swept over again. Wherever it passed, a terrifying cold air spread. The surrounding floating rocks were all frozen into ice. Zhuowen took a deep breath and took out a jade bottle. This jade bottle contained the 7-colored divine spring. He pulled out the cork and poured all 7 drops of the divine spring of different colors into his mouth in one breath. When the 7-colored divine spring entered Zhuowen's body, it turned into 7 types of energy and spread through his meridians. Suddenly, Zhuowen's muscles swelled. 7 colored meridians appeared between the lines of his muscles, densely covering the surface of Zhuowen's skin. The moment he drank the 7-colored divine spring, Yun took out the sword heartgrass and placed it on his palm. Surging shattered divine force condensed in his palm. The originally inconspicuous sword heartgrass suddenly burst with a terrifying sword intent under the infusion of the shattered divine force. Immediately, the sword heartgrass began to grow wildly and finally grew to the length of a normal divine sword. This sword was very extraordinary. It looked like a divine sword, but when he touched it, he felt like he was touching a blade of grass. Zhuowen knew that the divine sword was purely made of sword heartgrass. Its essence was still grass, but it was an extraordinary grass. Bang! With the sword heartgrass in hand, Yun stood on the bone dragon. Boom! The terrifying sword intent formed an intense storm that bombarded the bone dragon. It immediately blocked the bone dragon's advance. Bang! 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 The bone dragon tore through the storm of sword intent and rushed up again, fighting Zhuowen. Zhuowen was not to be outdone. The two fought crazily in the chaotic starry sky. It had to be said that the sword heartgrass could indeed restrain the blight. Zhuowen found that the sword heartgrass could actually weaken the bone dragon's power when it bombarded the bone dragon. At the same time, because he had taken the 7-colored divine spring, his current physique was just enough to be partially immune to the power of the blight. The bone dragon was originally formed from the blight, so when it bombarded Zhuowen, most of its power was actually immune. If Zhuowen had not taken the 7-colored divine spring, he would have been seriously injured in a few moves. But now, the two had exchanged dozens of moves. Zhuowen was fighting fiercer and fiercer, and the injuries he suffered were relatively light. The bone dragon could not help but be furious when it saw that it could not take down the human in front of it. In the depths of the chaotic starry sky, more bone spikes swept out from the 2 black holes. These bone spikes all converged on the bone dragon's body. Suddenly, the bone dragon's body swelled again, reaching an extremely exaggerated level. Moreover, the blight aura on the bone dragon's body became stronger. Boom! The bone dragon suddenly clawed at Zhuowen. The power of this move became even more terrifying, sweeping up a terrifying storm. Zhuowen's expression changed slightly, and he held the sword heartgrass in front of him. Boom! The dragon claw and the sword heartgrass collided. Suddenly, a terrifying energy ripple surged at the point of contact. This energy ripple turned into a violent shock wave, constantly spreading in all directions. Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. He flew backward for thousands of kilometers before he could barely stabilize his body. His condition was quite miserable, and his body was dripping with blood. His muscles could not withstand the terrifying pressure, so most of them had burst open. Now, he looked like a bloody man. Its power has become so much stronger. Zhuowen's expression became extremely ugly. At the same time, he also found that the 2 black holes in the depths of the chaotic starry sky began to shrink. He knew that the bone dragon should have gathered most of the blight energy from the black holes. As long as he could defeat the bone dragon, he should be able to pass this blight. Thinking of this, Zhuowen took out the darkest stone. He breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he was well prepared. He had prepared 3 items that could weaken the blight. As for the darkest stone, it was the most powerful of the 3. When Zhuowen crushed the darkest stone, the dark energy contained in the stone rushed out like a tide, entangling the surface of the sword heartgrass. The surface of the sword heartgrass, which was originally emitting a green luster, turned black, and its aura soared more than 10 times. When the sword heart grass and the darkest stone merged, a huge shadow shrouded Zhuan. The bone dragon had already appeared above Zhuowen's head, and its huge dragon claw mercilessly slammed down. Bang! Zhuan swept out his sword and stood on the dragon claw. Strangely, the dark energy on the surface of the sword heart grass disintegrated and was annihilated into powder when it came in contact with the dragon claw. It's effective? Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He stomped his right foot and rushed up like an arrow, cutting off the bone dragon's head with his sword. Then, he landed on the bone dragon's spine. Holding the hilt of the sword heart grass with both hands, he stabbed it into the gap in the spine. Then, holding the hilt with both hands, he quickly ran along the spine toward the bone dragon's tail. Chapter 3647. What a surging power! When the bone dragon fell to the ground, the two black holes in the depths of the chaotic starry sky slowly dissipated. At the same time, a mysterious power emerged from somewhere in the chaotic starry sky and entered Zhuowen's body. It was like a blessing that entered Zhuowen's Tianling acupoint and spread throughout his body, causing Zhuowen to feel an indescribable sense of comfort. Zhuowen, on the other hand, felt as if his entire body had undergone a metamorphosis. His entire being was filled with inexhaustible power. I've finally successfully advanced to the fifth blight. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with excitement. The moment he entered the fifth blight, Zhuowen discovered that the pressure exerted on him by the surrounding chaotic starry sky seemed to have weakened. However, he knew that it was not that the pressure of the chaotic starry sky had weakened, but that he had become stronger. Now, he was very confident that he did not need to use his spirit attack. Just his fragmented divine power and primordial divine powers were enough to rival a heaven-crushing first transformation elite. If he used his spirit attack, Zhuowen was confident that he would not be afraid of a heaven-crushing third transformation elite. It had to be said that after Zhuowen's spirit absorbed the primordial stone, his spirit cultivation was extremely fast, and there were no bottlenecks at all. He knew that all of these benefits were brought about by the primordial stone. Now, he was looking forward to cultivating the official primordial technique after his cultivation reached the heaven-crushing stage. He did not know how much the primordial technique would change him. Zhuowen re-entered the heavenly mystic realm and returned to the Xianmi heavenly domain through it. He did not return to Ryuka. Instead, he headed straight for the natural moat. Now that his cultivation and soul had made major breakthroughs, Zhuowen believed that even if he were to face Gong Ji Lu and NIC, who had given him a lot of pressure, he would still be able to deal with them. Therefore, he planned to go to the natural moat to see if Gong Qilyu and NIC were still guarding outside. Moreover, he was also a little worried that the army of the Golden Galaxy would attack at any time. Although Zhou Yan had confessed to him that it was not easy to create a large-scale teleportation formation in the Golden Galaxy and required a lot of effort and time. At least for a short period of time, the army of the Golden Galaxy would not be able to reach the wandering starry sky. Zhuowen knew that after confirming that the army of the Golden Galaxy had not arrived, he planned to enter the Merciless Pearl. Regardless of whether Moyan Wushang had passed the trial in the bead or not, he had to find her and bring her out. Lord Zhuo, why did you come down personally? When Zhuowen reached the depths of the moat, he immediately attracted the attention of the cultivators stationed here. The one who asked him was the Black King. Apart from human cultivators, there were also many non-human cultivators stationed in the depths of the natural moat. Besides, the humankind and the non-humankind were no longer hostile to each other, and now, they were living in harmony. The nine-tailed fox ancestor followed closely behind the Black King and bowed deeply to Zhuowen in greeting. I came down to see if there's anything wrong with this place. Black King, open the array first. I want to go outside and take a look, Zhuowen said indifferently. The Black King was stunned and immediately advised, Lord Zhuo, this is the real chaotic starry sky. It is full of negative energy and terrifying pressure. Even low-level heaven-breaking realm experts will be affected by the chaotic starry sky. Those below the heaven-breaking realm will even endanger their lives. Zhuowen nodded and said, I know about this. This is my arrangement. Don't worry, I have never done anything reckless. Zhuan seemed to have thought of something. He remembered that Zhou Yan's cultivation was only at the third decay, but he could hide in the chaotic starry sky outside the wandering starry sky and investigate everything in the wandering starry sky. Didn't the black dragon come from the chaotic starry sky when he came to the border? They didn't seem to be affected by the chaotic starry sky. What was going on? The Golden Galaxy has a long history. In such a long history, they might have invented something that can temporarily dispel the influence of the chaotic starry sky. Zhuan thought. The Black King and the Nine-Tailed Fox clan ancestor looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Although they felt that Zhuan's suggestion was inappropriate, they didn't dare to disobey Zhuan's orders. After the formation opened, Zhuan took a step forward. Following his memories, he arrived at the location of Gong Jilu's divine ship. However, to Zhuan's disappointment, there was only a huge rock and faint energy ripples. As for Gong Jilu and NIC, they were long gone. Zhuan didn't believe it. He released his divine sense and stepped on the rock with his right foot, flying away from the border. Lord Zhua is really strong. He doesn't seem to be affected by the chaotic starry sky at all. Inside the border, both human and foreign cultivators stared blankly at Zhuan's figure moving freely in the chaotic starry sky. After a while, Zhuan returned to the border. He frowned slightly. Just now, he had looked around but didn't find any trace of Gong Jilu and NIC. Zhuan was very confident in his current divine sense. With the strength of his divine sense, no matter how well Gong Jilu and NIC hid, they couldn't escape his detection. Moreover, with Gong Jilu and NIC's arrogance, if Zhuan came out of the border, they would have attacked him. However, there was no movement at all. He knew that there was only one possibility, and that was that Gong Jilu and NIC were no longer here. It seems that Gong Jilu and NIC have gone to the Golden Galaxy. Zhuan thought to himself. After he returned to the border, he began to set up several formations again. Each formation was at the heaven-breaking stage, and they were all linked together. They were extremely powerful. In addition, Zhuan gave the great world to his doppelganger. The resources and heaven-breaking divine weapons in the great world were still inside. He planned to let his original body enter the ruthless and desireless pearl, while his doppelganger remained in Ryuka. In addition, Zhuan also left 3 perfect soul sword essences in his original body. With the power of the soul sword essences and heaven-breaking divine weapons, Zhuan knew that no matter how powerful the divine master of the Golden Galaxy was, he probably couldn't take down his doppelganger. As for Gong Jilu and NIC, he was even less worried. It was unlikely that the two of them would sever their cultivation. Even if they did, it would be a good thing for Zhuan. It would be much easier for him to kill the two of them. After making all the necessary preparations, Zhuan sent his doppelganger back to Ryuka, while his original body set up a temporary cave abode in a remote cave above the natural moat. After setting up many restrictions at the entrance of the cave abode, he took out the ruthless and desireless pearl and stared at the faintly discernible passage inside the pearl. Chapter 3648. When Zhuan's divine sense probed into the ruthless and desireless pearl, he discovered that his field of vision had changed instantly. His surroundings were no longer the interior of the cave abode, but filled with clouds and mist. And beneath his feet were gray steps. These steps continued to rise, forming a passageway. Zhuan was very familiar with this passageway. It was precisely the passageway inside the ruthless and desireless pearl. When Zhuan withdrew his divine sense, his field of vision returned to the cave abode again, and before his eyes was the ruthless and desireless pearl. Looks like the way to enter this pearl is to use divine sense as a key to open the passageway inside this pearl. Zhuan was very clear just now. Not only did his divine sense enter the pearl, but his entire person had entered. He hid the pearl in a very concealed place, then used his divine sense to enter the interior of the pearl once more. He looked at the end of the passageway, but could only see pitch-black darkness. Even his divine sense was actually unable to probe too far before it was blocked back by some kind of power. He knew that inside this pearl world he could only rely on his naked eyes. His divine sense was completely restricted. This made Zhuan secretly vigilant in his heart. Now that his divine sense had already reached the level of the heaven-crushing 3 transformations, it was actually still so severely suppressed inside this pearl. It could be seen that the power hidden inside this pearl was far beyond his imagination. Zhuan followed the passageway and quickly swept forward. In a short while, he arrived at the end of the passageway. At the end stood a large, round, arched, hollowed-out door. This door was forged from some kind of white jade. Now, it was very dilapidated. Clearly, it was extremely old. At the edge of the door's arc, Zhuan saw a line of writing. This line of writing was very faint. Under the erosion of a long time, this writing had already gradually been worn away. But Zhuan could still barely make out the contents of this writing from the traces of the writing. Severing the 7 emotions? Severing the 6 desires? What a load of nonsense! Zhuan muttered to himself, but his eyes narrowed, and he fell into deep thought. It looked like the person who left behind the words on this door back then completely disagreed with the practice of severing the 7 emotions and severing the 6 desires. Just did not know who exactly this person was? Zhuan did not ponder for too long as he stepped through the door. The moment he entered the gate, he realized that the ruins and desolation that he had seen from outside the gate had completely changed. What appeared in front of his eyes was a sea of beautiful women singing and dancing, debauchery and debauchery. Zhuowen's eyes were filled with the sight of jade bodies lying on the ground. Even Zhuowen felt a little hot from the bottom of his heart. These little brothers are so handsome. You just came to our place, right? Come, big sister will play with you tonight. A snow-white figure leaned over. This was a beautiful young woman. She was wearing a translucent veil, and her skin was faintly discernible. She was indescribably seductive. Her breath smelled like orchids and her beautiful eyes were intoxicated. She whispered seductively into Zhuowen's ear. An illusion? Zhuowen frowned slightly, and a powerful spiritual power gushed out from between his eyebrows. Like a big hand, it instantly tore the surrounding illusion into pieces. But soon, he realized that the illusion that he had torn apart had revived. The scene of beautiful women singing and dancing, and the scene of debauchery, once again appeared in front of his eyes. And the seductive body that was leaning on him was also tightly pressed against him, full of endless temptation. Pretending to be mysterious. Zhuowen grunted coldly as he utilized his soul sword insight to slash apart the illusions in the surroundings. But what shocked him was that the illusion appeared again, and the scene was even more exciting. Zhuowen repeatedly tore apart the illusion, but in the end, it was to no avail. The illusion was restored. He knew that using violence to break this illusion was probably not going to work. He could not help but think of the words in front of the gate. Cutting off the 7 emotions, cutting off the 6 desires, a bunch of nonsense? The 7 emotions and 6 desires were originally human emotions. They were originally innate. Cutting off the 7 emotions and 6 desires was actually going against the laws of heaven. It was actually a crooked path. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a look of understanding. He knew that the 7 emotions and 6 desires were not forced. It should be more of a natural thing. Thinking of this, Zhuowen no longer used his spiritual power to destroy the illusion in front of him. Instead, he sat quietly on the spot, narrowed his eyes, and began to cultivate the power of his soul, putting all his attention on cultivation. More and more snow-white bodies took the initiative to lean on Zhuowen's body, and the surrounding air was filled with a seductive fragrance. Yin was as motionless as a mountain. He sat in place, and the spiritual power between his eyebrows surged, emitting a faint light. After an unknown amount of time, the surrounding sounds of beautiful women singing and dancing disappeared. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. What appeared in his eyes was no longer a world of debauchery, but a desolate graveyard. This graveyard was very large, and there were many tombs around it. Each of the tombs had a lush green will, the wisp hovering above them. In this dark night, it was like a street lamp leading to the kingdom of death. In the cold wind, there was the unpleasant sound of ravens, the howling of hungry wolves in the distance, and the whistling of the wind in the surroundings. When these sounds gathered together, It actually gave people a hair-raising feeling. Suddenly, there was the sound of soil breaking out of the surrounding tombs, as if something was coming out of the soil. One after another, white bones crawled out of the graveyard. Some of the white bones still had pieces of flesh that had not completely rotted, and disgusting maggots crawled on them. The goal of these white bones was surprisingly the same, and they all crawled toward Jun. Jun stood in place, quietly watching the white bones crawl on his body and tear his flesh. The bone hands tore out bloody flesh from his body, and there was also a horrifying chewing sound. These white bones began to chew and swallow the flesh that was torn off. In a short while, Zhuowen's flesh had long been torn off, leaving only a bloody skeleton. But at the glabella of this bloody skeleton, the divine soul light was still flickering and had not been extinguished. Zhuowen stood in place silently for a long time. No idea when the surrounding illusionary realm changed again, and he was completely unscathed. There was no sign of his flesh being torn off at all. Just like this, Jun continuously reincarnated in one illusionary realm after another. The only thing he did was to continuously temper his divine soul while reincarnating in the illusionary realms. One had to admit that these illusionary realms were all very realistic. Between the reincarnations of illusionary realms and illusionary realms, Jun sensed a certain divine soul law that he had never felt before. He was finding out this law, and continuously tempering his divine soul. And what made him pleasantly surprised was that his divine soul was indeed steadily becoming stronger. Originally, his divine soul had just broken through to the heaven-crushing third transformation, and was merely at the initial stage of the third transformation. But now, his divine soul had transformed again, and actually reached the middle stage of the third transformation. One had to admit that the benefits of the illusionary realms to him were indeed hard to imagine. After who knew how long, Yun suddenly opened both eyes, only to see that the illusionary realm scene before his eyes already completely disappeared. What appeared before his eyes was a stretch of ruins and wasteland. It was precisely the scene that he saw inside the door when he was outside the door previously. His gaze suddenly converged on not far ahead, inside a dilapidated divine temple. He saw the figure of a woman inside. The woman was lying on the steps of the divine temple, not moving at all. Zhuan came to the woman's side and turned her over, his eyes revealing a look of excitement. Chapter 3649. Puji. Moyan Wushang, who was in Zhuowen's arms, suddenly opened her eyes. She held a sharp dagger in her right hand and stabbed it into Zhuowen's heart. Zhuowen dropped Moyan Wushang and took a few steps back. He looked at the dagger in his chest in disbelief. Wushang. Zhuowen pulled out the dagger and looked at Moyan Wushang in confusion. Moyan Wushang's beautiful eyes were filled with coldness. She looked at Zhuowen as if she was looking at a stranger. At the same time, Yun found that the dagger was coated with poison. The poison was extremely strong. It spread from his heart to all the meridians in his body. Under the poison, his whole body was paralyzed and he began to lose feeling in his muscles. Yun sat cross-legged on the ground and began to use the primordial chant. Only then could he resist the poison's corrosion. Brother Zhuo, how could I do this to you? Suddenly, Moyan Wushang covered her mouth with both hands. Her beautiful eyes were filled with disbelief and guilt. As he spoke, Moyan Wushang stepped forward to help Zhuowen up. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and looked deeply at Moyan Wushang. He stopped her and said, "Wushang, don't come over. I need to relieve myself." Moyan Wushang did not stop. She said with a worried face, "Brother Zhuo, how can this be? Your injuries are very serious, and I accidentally injured you. I will take responsibility for you." Moyan Wushang came to Zhuowen's side and reached out to help him up. But the moment she touched Zhuowen, her beautiful face changed. Zhuowen suddenly blasted out a palm towards Moyan Wushang's forehead. Moyan Wushang reacted quickly. She tilted her head and dodged the palm. But the palm was too fast. Although Moyan Wushang dodged the attack, it still landed on her left shoulder. Moyan Wushang's left shoulder was destroyed. She groaned and stepped back. Her beautiful eyes looked coldly at Zhuowen. Clang. At Moyan Wushang's feet, a dagger fell. This dagger wasn't taken from Zhuowen. It was the second dagger that Moyen of Wushang had taken out. "For you?" Zhuowen asked coldly as he looked at Moyen of War in front of him. His current situation was very bad. The poison on the dagger was stronger than he had expected. Even he could barely hold on, and it was extremely strenuous. The reason why he suspected Moyen Wushang was because when the dagger pierced his heart, there was only coldness in her beautiful eyes. There was no trace of guilt. It was only when she discovered that he was actually able to resist the poison that her eyes revealed concern and guilt. Although this change in expression was very short, it was caught by Zhuan. Therefore, he was certain that the woman in front of him was not Moyen Wushang. "It's me. I'm Wushang. Big brother Zhuo. You're so fierce, I'm a little scared." Moyen of Wushang's beautiful eyes revealed a pitiful look. She gradually approached Zhuan, her delicate body trembling. Zhuan took out the detoxification pill and the healing pill from the spiritual ring and swallowed them all. Although he didn't know what kind of poison was in his body, although the detoxification pill couldn't completely cure it, it could greatly reduce the toxicity. What a joke! I don't care who you are. As long as you're not Wushang, I really don't care. After Zhuowen's body was slightly better, he took a deep breath and revealed a self-mocking smile. Moyen of Wushang didn't understand. She once again walked toward Zhuan. The grievance on her face was even more intense. She apologized to Zhuowen, stating that she didn't do it on purpose. "Hong Meng floating blade." Zhuowen sneered. His hands formed a seal, and a purple blade swept out from the void. Its direction was unpredictable, and finally, it cut into Moyen of Wushang's back. Moyen of Wushang screamed. Immediately, her body began to fade and finally disappeared in front of his eyes. Still an illusion? Seeing Moyen of Wushang disappear in front of him, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He originally thought that he had broken all the illusions in this place. He didn't expect that the Moyen of Wushang that appeared was also an illusion. Moreover, this illusion was extremely realistic. He was really injured, and the injury was real. "It seems that I was careless. This place is probably an illusion. As time passes, the illusion here will become more and more realistic." Zhuowen's gaze was dignified. He knew that he had underestimated this place. His guess was right. The illusions were not over yet, and the following illusions would cause substantial damage. In other words, if you were injured in the illusion, your body in reality would also suffer the same injury. If you were careless and died in the illusion, you would really die. However, the real illusions didn't appear in waves, but intermittently. When you broke through an illusion, the next illusion might appear a few days later. It might even be half a month, or even longer before the next illusion appeared. Zhuan walked on this land of illusion. He didn't know where the end was. He only knew that he had to keep moving forward. Although in the process of breaking the illusion, his divine soul was indeed constantly improving in an invisible way. However, as time passed, Zhuan gradually became numb. He even began to lose track of time. He couldn't remember how long he had been walking on this land of illusion. 1 year, 2 years, even 10 years, he couldn't remember. He only knew that he had been walking on this land for a long time. "No, I can't waste too much time here." On the vast and desolate land, Zhuowen stopped in his tracks. His numb gaze suddenly sharpened. The invasion of the Golden Universe Starry Sky Army was not far away. Although he had made full preparations, he still felt that something was wrong. He had a trump card, but Gong Ji Lu and NIC were not ordinary people. Did they not have a trump card as well? Moreover, since Zhuowen's main body entered the bead world, he found that the connection between him and his clone was completely cut off. After all, divine soul power could only be exerted by the main body. Now that the connection between the main body and his clone was cut off, the clone's divine soul power was actually very weak. Except for the 3 divine soul sword intents left by the main body, the clone's divine soul was only equivalent to a 5th blight powerhouse. Suddenly, Thoen stopped. He found that in the distance in front of the wasteland, he vaguely saw a pavilion in the air. Below the pavilion in the air, there was an oasis that was completely different from the wasteland. "Let's go and take a look." Chapter 3650. In the depths of the moat, human and outsider armies were patrolling the border as usual. Suddenly, a human cultivator discovered that a giant white vortex had appeared hundreds of millions of kilometers away from the border. The vortex flashed with dazzling light, spreading out in all directions like sunlight. Then, the human cultivator discovered that one army after another was emerging from the vortex. That's the army of Golden Cosmos? The human cultivator's cry of surprise alerted the other patrolling cultivators. They also looked into the primal chaos starry sky outside. Sure enough, they saw the white vortex and the armies walking out of it. These armies were neither human nor outsider. Instead, they were formed purely from metal and machinery. Quick, we have to report this to the Black King and Lord Ninefox. The first human cultivator to discover the army realized the severity of the situation and immediately took out a jade talisman to send an urgent message to the Black King. Soon, the Black King and Forefather Ninetailed arrived. When they saw the armies emerging from the white vortex in the distance, their expressions turned extremely grave. They knew that what was to come had finally arrived. We've been guarding this place for 10 years. The army of Golden Cosmos has arrived just as Lord Zhuo predicted, the Black King said with a complicated look in his eyes. Golden Cosmos is far more powerful than our galactic universe. We have to spread the news and gather all the cultivators in the cosmos. We have to stop Golden Cosmos attack. Forefather Ninetailed solemnly said. The Black King nodded and sent the news to Taoist 3 Purities, instructing him to spread the news. Forefather Ninetailed didn't want to be outdone and sent the news to the Wilderness Street as well. Soon, news of the arrival of Golden Cosmos army spread throughout the galactic universe. Within the palace of 3 Purities, the azure-robed Taoist slowly put away his jade talisman as he sat cross-legged in front of the stone statue. Lian Meng, get ready. The army of 3 Purities is to move out and head into the depths of the moat. Taoist 3 Purities said to Lian Meng, who had a respectful look in her eyes. Lian Meng had a grave look on her face. She knew very well what the main goal of 3 Purities' army was. For 3 Purities to mobilize this army meant that the army of Golden Cosmos had arrived. After Lian Meng left, 3 Purities revealed a helpless look. I didn't think that the army of Golden Cosmos would arrive so quickly. He sighed softly and put away the jade talisman in his hand. Zhuan had given him the jade talisman as a reward for the Stone of Darkness. It was something that 3 Purities yearned for even in his dreams. This was the heaven-crushing technique, the extreme purple spirit technique. Ever since the 3 Pure Ones received the purple extreme spiritual technique, they had been in seclusion all year round in order to cultivate this technique and break through to the heaven-crushing stage. He had planned to cultivate in seclusion until the heaven-crushing stage. Unfortunately, the golden corner starry sky had come at this time. This made the 3 Pure Ones very unhappy. Under of Golden Cosmos. In addition, Dong Huang Tai of the Demon Saint Palace also received the news immediately. He had been preparing for the war all these years. Therefore, when he received the news, the first thing he did was to bring out the demon race army that he had reorganized over the years. He personally led the army to the heavenly moat. Many cultivators from Xianmi Heavenly Domain and Void Heavenly Domain. They formed their own teams and set off toward Heaven's Moat. Xianmi Heavenly Region. In an unremarkable mountain valley, there was the encampment of the number 1 force in Xianmi Heavenly Region, the Long family. Daddy, I want a hug. In the courtyard of Ryuka's main building, a 10-year-old boy who was as delicate as a porcelain doll was running toward a man in front of him excitedly. Then, he threw himself into the man's arms. In addition to the man, there was also a beautiful woman in the courtyard. The woman looked at the man and the boy with eyes full of tenderness and joy. This family of 3 was Zhuan, Mu Chenxue, and their child, Zhuojin. June, you're already 10 years old. You're already a little adult. Do you still need Daddy to carry you? Zhuan picked up Zhuojun and pinched his chubby cheeks. Daddy is so bad. Even if I'm 20 years old, I'm still your son. Isn't it natural for a son to let Daddy carry him? Zhuojun, and used his small hands to block Zhuowen's hands and pouted his lips. Jun shook his head helplessly. His son's personality was not like his and Mu Qinshue's at all. He had been mischievous since he was young and had a lot of ideas. However, Zhuo Jun's talent made Zhuowen think highly of him. Zhuo Jun was a sage immortal when he was born. When he was 5 years old, Zhuo Jun broke through the sage immortal stage and reached the soul formation stage. When he was 8 years old, he broke through to the true immortal stage. When he was 10 years old, he was already at the peak of the true immortal stage. He was definitely the youngest true immortal that Zhuowen had ever seen. One had to know that in the entire universe, no matter how talented a genius was, it would take at least a few hundred years to reach the soul formation stage. However, Zhuo Jun only used 10 years, and he did not cultivate at all, to break through easily. Even Zhuowen couldn't help but admire this cultivation speed. When he was 10 years old, he basically didn't have any cultivation. He just had a strong physical body. Moreover, looking at Zhuo Jun's current aura, Zhuowen knew that he would be able to break through the shackles of the true immortal stage and enter the virtual sky world when he was 11 years old. He even suspected that with Zhuo Jun's terrifying talent, he would be able to smoothly reach the Tao before he reached adulthood. This was very likely. Suddenly, there was a knock on the courtyard's door. Zhuowen handed Zhuo Jun to Mu Qinshui and opened the door. Outside the door, Green Hat was standing respectfully. "Master, something bad has happened. The Black King sent news that the Golden Corner Starry Skies army has arrived near the border." Green Hat said with a serious look. "What? So fast?" Zhuowen's pupils shrank. "Qinshui, I'll go to the reception hall with Green Hat to discuss some things. You take Jun back first." Zhuowen knew the situation was urgent, so he ordered Mu Qinshui and left the courtyard with Green Hat. He was now only a doppelganger in Ryuka. Ever since the main body entered the merciless pearl, the doppelganger could no longer sense the main body's aura. It couldn't even contact the main body. As for the main body, the doppelganger had never told anyone in the clan. He was afraid that if he told them, the clan would be worried. He planned to find a suitable opportunity to tell Mu Qinshui and the others. The only thing he could rejoice about now was that the doppelganger confirmed that the main body was still alive. The main body and the doppelganger were one, and the main body was the main body. If the main body died, the doppelganger wouldn't live for long either. In the past 10 years, although the doppelganger had lost contact with the main body, it was still alive and well, which meant that the main body was fine. On the way to the reception hall, Zhuowen gathered many of Ryuka's important higher-ups. The Golden Corner Starry Skies army had arrived, so he had to show up. After all, as the #1 person in the Starry Sky, he had become the idol of many cultivators in the Starry Sky. If he didn't fight, it would affect the morale of the Starry Sky. "Mother, can I participate in this battle?" Zhuo Jun watched Zhuowen's back as he left. The mischievous look in his eyes had already disappeared. It was replaced with determination and sharpness. He had already heard about the Golden Corner Starry Sky matter from Mu Qinshui, so he knew what was going on. Chapter 3651. In the reception hall of Ryuka, Nguyen sat in the main seat. There weren't many people in the hall, but most of them were the higher-ups of Ryuka, such as Green Hat, Purple Star Lord, and Long Xiaolun. At this moment, everyone in the hall had a solemn expression. They had obviously heard about the arrival of the Golden Galaxy Army. The Golden Galaxy Army has arrived outside the Wandering Galaxy. Now, all the cultivators in the galaxy are preparing for battle. We have also formed a team in Ryuka. Long Xiaotian was about to speak when Zhuowen interrupted him. "Father, Ryuka is still in the development stage. There are too few strong cultivators. Ryuka will not participate in this battle," Zhuowen said in a deep voice. Not participating in the battle? Long Xiaotian was stunned. "Yes, Green Hat, Brother Purple Star, and I will go to Heaven's Moat. The rest will stay in Ryuka. As long as no Heavenbreaker cultivators invade, Ryuka is the safest place," Zhuowen said. Everyone looked at each other and felt relieved. Zhuowen was right. The valley where Ryuka was located had several Heavenbreaker Level 1 formations set up by Jun. It was impregnable, and ordinary cultivators would not be able to break through it. Jun gave Long Xiaotian some instructions and handed over the Ryuka formation flags to him. Then he left Ryuka with Green Hat and Purple Star Lord. Green Hat had a good life in Ryuka. Not only did he have a lot of resources to cultivate, but he also received the 7 Lives Chi Recovery Pill from Jun. His cultivation speed was extremely fast. 3 years ago, Green Hat had already entered the 5th Heaven's Blight. As for Purple Star Lord, he had obtained the inheritance of the immortal bird. Before the 5th Heaven's Blight, he didn't have any bottlenecks. As long as he had enough resources, his cultivation speed was much faster than Green Hat's. Over the years, Purple Star Lord's cultivation had broken through again and again, and he was now in the early 4th Heaven's Blight. The two of them were the strongest cultivators in Ryuka other than Jun. Therefore, Jun brought them with him in this battle. Outside the border of Heaven's Moat, the White Whirlpool was still there, and mechanical armies were being transported over. When the last army crossed over, all the soldiers faced the White Vortex and knelt on one knee. They shouted in unison, "God Lord and Great God Master." As God, a group of people walked out of the whirlpool. The person was the god of Golden Galaxy. A man and a woman were standing next to the Divine Lord. They were Gong Kilyu and Nic of the Nua clan. The Great God Master stood silently behind the three of them, looking down at them submissively. Other than that, there were 49 mechanical life forms of various shapes and sizes following closely behind the Grand Master. The unique characteristic of these 49 mechanical life forms was that their auras were extremely powerful. Unexpectedly, the aura of each mechanical life form was not weaker than Green Hat, who had just broken through. A few of them were even close to the 3 pure ones. They were all in the 5th Heaven's Blight. These were the 49 divine protectors of Golden Corner Starry Sky. They had once gone on expeditions in Golden Corner Starry Sky, experienced hundreds of battles, and made countless outstanding contributions in battle. Every one of them was an exceptionally brilliant figure in the history of Golden Corner Starry Sky. I didn't expect the large-scale teleportation formation to be completed in advance. This is all thanks to Lord Gongji and Lord Ni. The God Master looked at the distant galaxy. His eyes were filled with excitement, and he quickly bowed to Gongji Lu and Nic. Gongji Lu and Nic were not formation masters and had never set up a large formation before. However, they came from a high-tier realm like the 100 Domains and had seen countless high-tier formations there. They had only told the Great God Master about the characteristics of the large-scale teleportation formation that they had seen before, and he had benefited greatly. It was this rare experience that allowed the large-scale teleportation formation to be completed in advance. Otherwise, the large-scale teleportation formation would have taken at least 50 years to complete. God Master, you're too polite. This should be due to you and the Great God Master. I only helped a little. Gongji Lu said indifferently. Nic, who was standing next to Gongji Lu, also said, God Master, after conquering Golden Galaxy, don't forget what we told you to do. The God Master quickly bowed. Lord Ni, don't worry. I've never dared to forget your orders. It's just that. Gongji Lu saw the God Master's worry and smiled. I know what you're worried about. The sudden appearance of the primordial chaos path probably means that a heaven-breaking realm powerhouse has just appeared in this galaxy. Gongji Lu revealed a mocking smile and continued, however, you don't have to worry. I'll help you kill that guy who just broke through the heaven-breaking realm. The God Master was stunned. Then, he saw Gongji Lu take out a golden scepter from his spirit ring. The scepter was golden in color. The only difference was that there was a black snake coiled around the top of the scepter. It was unknown what material the black snake was made of. When the God Master looked into the dark red eyes of the black snake, he felt his hair stand on end. It was as if he was really being stared at by the snake. Nic's beautiful eyes changed slightly when she saw the scepter. She wanted to say something but was stopped by Gongji Lu. God Master, this scepter is called the Snake Shadow Divine Scepter. Do you know what grade of divine artifact this scepter is? Gongji Lu gently stroked the black snake scepter and asked with a faint smile. The God Master, the Great God Master, and the 49 Divine Guardians all broke out in cold sweat when they saw the Snake Shadow Divine Scepter. Their bodies trembled slightly. Although the Snake Shadow Divine Scepter didn't do anything, it had already affected them imperceptibly. From this, it could be seen that this scepter was extraordinary. This should be a heaven-breaking level 2 divine artifact. The God Master lowered his head, not daring to look into the black snake's scarlet eyes. It wasn't that he had never seen a divine artifact before. Back then, a heaven-breaking realm senior from the Golden Galaxy had returned to the Golden Galaxy to search for his descendants' bloodline. He had personally received that senior and had seen that senior's heaven-breaking divine artifact. However, that senior's divine artifact was only a heaven-breaking level 1 divine artifact. Although its aura was very powerful, it was far inferior to the Snake Shadow Divine Scepter in front of him. Huh? Heaven-breaking level 2? Gongji Lu smiled coldly and couldn't help but shake his head. Could it be? The God Master realized something and his pupils constricted. The Snake Shadow Divine Scepter is a heaven-breaking level 3 divine artifact. One has to know that even in the 100 domains, there aren't many heaven-breaking level 3 divine artifacts. I'll lend this Snake Shadow Divine Scepter to you temporarily. Don't disappoint me. As he spoke, Gongji Lu handed the Snake Shadow Divine Scepter to the God Master. The God Master's throat trembled as he subconsciously took the Snake Shadow Divine Scepter. His eyes were filled with an inexplicable expression. This is the token to use the Snake Shadow Divine Scepter. This divine artifact is too powerful. Your cultivation is too weak, so it's difficult for you to control it. With this token, you can use a portion of its power. Gongji Lu threw another token to the God Master. Thank you, Lord Gong. This lowly one really doesn't know what to say. The God Master reached out to take the token. His entire body was trembling. He was too excited to be able to use a heaven-breaking divine artifact in this life. Chapter 3652. Gongji Lu clasped his hands behind his back and said calmly, Go. As long as you complete the mission I've given you, I'll fulfill my promise to you. The Divine Lord's body trembled when he heard this. His eyes were filled with excitement. Thank you, Lord Gong. This lowly one definitely won't disappoint you. Just wait for my good news, Lord Gong. With that, the Divine Lord summoned an enormous flying ship. He led the Grand Divine Master, the 49 Divine Protectors, and a large army into the ship, then piloted it and flew towards the distant spiral galaxy. When Zhuan arrived at the depths of Heaven's Moat with Green Hat and Star Monarch Crepe Myrtle, they found that an extremely large number of cultivators had already gathered there. The cultivators of the 3 Purities Palace, Chaos Street, Monster Saint Palace, and the other celestial realms had all gathered there. Zhuowen, on the other hand, was considered to be the last batch to arrive. Greetings, Lord Zhua. Taoist 3 Purities hurriedly led the others forward and bowed respectfully to Zhu. Ever since he'd witnessed Zhuowen's great power, as well as the fact that Zhuowen could casually give him a heaven-shattering technique like the extreme purple spiritual art, he'd been filled with resentment. The 3 Pure Ones' resentment toward Zhuowen had long since turned into reverence. He knew that the gap between him and Zhuowen was very large, so he no longer had any thoughts of competing with Zhuowen. Wouldn't that be suicide? Zhuowen nodded and said solemnly, The battle is imminent. Everyone don't slack off. Take these as well. With that, Zhuowen waved his sleeve. Instantly, numerous talismans glowing with a dim light fell like rain into the hands of the cultivators present. These are... 3 Purities flipped his hand over and looked at the talismans in his palm, somewhat puzzled. These are teleportation talismans I made myself. They can teleport you to anywhere several billion kilometers away. If the battle turns against us, crush these talismans and flee the battlefield. Zhuowen said solemnly. Everyone's hearts sank. In their hearts, Zhuowen was truly the strongest person beneath the stars. However, from Zhuowen's actions, they could see that even Zhuowen was not optimistic about this battle. Was the golden starry sky really that strong? The 3 Pure Ones, the Black King, and the other higher-ups calmly put away their teleportation talismans. Unlike other ordinary cultivators, they already had an understanding of the strength of Golden Corner Starry Sky and knew that the gap between the two starry skies was not small. As far as they knew, there were 51 fifth blight powerhouses in Golden Corner Starry Sky. This number was dozens of times that of Wandering Starry Sky. The disparity was too obvious. Zhuowen's gaze was extremely solemn. Right now, his main combat power was mainly his original body. Even though the clone possessed the main body's trump card and Heaven Breaker Divine Tool, it was still far inferior to the main body. After all, the main body's divine sense was far too powerful. This was something that the clone couldn't compare to. The Golden Corner Starry Skies army is here. They are all in that huge spaceship. Suddenly, a commotion came from the front. Many cultivators cried out in surprise. Zhuan looked over. Indeed, in the distance of the chaotic starry sky, a huge metal spaceship was flying towards them. The deck area of this metal spaceship was very large. On the deck stood an army of mechanical life forms. He noticed that at the bow of the ship, there was a majestic voice standing quietly. It was a humanoid mechanical life form. Its appearance was that of a middle-aged man, but its entire body exuded a metallic color. It looked like a robot. The aura of this middle-aged humanoid mechanical life form was extremely vast. Even Zhuowen felt a trace of pressure. Zhuowen knew that this person should be the divine master of Golden Corner Starry Sky. He had already learned about it when he was with Zhou Yan. At the same time, he also noticed that not far behind the spaceship, where the white vortex had disappeared, there was still a divine ship there. This divine ship was far smaller than the spaceship of the Golden Corner Starry Skies army, but it was much more exquisite. Jun was no stranger to this divine ship. It was the divine ship of Gong Ji Lu and NIC. He could even see two figures standing quietly on the deck of the divine ship. Looks like I can't be careless. Jun narrowed his eyes. He secretly took out array flags from the Great World and secretly set them up around him. When his original body was still in Ryuka, he had spent a large part of his time deducing all kinds of array formations. Although the level of his array formation did not increase significantly because of this, Zhuowen had a deeper understanding of the heaven-breaking level 1 array formation. The heaven-breaking level 1 array that he had set up was extremely powerful. It was even more powerful than an ordinary heaven-breaking level 1 array. There were also more types of array formations. At this moment, the array flags that the doppelganger had taken out were all large arrays that his original body had set up in Ryuka. They were 3 different types of killing arrays. After he secretly placed the array flags in a specific location, he used his divine consciousness to send a message to all the cultivators present. They were to wait for his command to teleport. Everyone trusted Zhuowen and did not have any objections. After a while, the spaceship in the distance had reached the border of the natural moat. Bam! However, when the spaceship landed at the border, a strong array formation ripple spread out and blocked the spaceship's forward momentum. Divine Master, this is a heaven-breaking level 1 defensive array. No, it's much weaker than an ordinary heaven-breaking level 1 defensive array. It's barely heaven-breaking level 1. The Grand Divine Master standing next to the Divine Master looked at the array formation that had countless array formation ripples in front of him and revealed a look of interest. Ever since Gong Ji Lu described all the arrays that he had seen in the 100 Outer Territories to the Grand Divine Master, the Grand Divine Master's array formation skills had not improved by much, but his knowledge had increased by a lot. Therefore, he could tell at a glance that the defensive array in front of him was barely heaven-breaking level 1. There are actually people in this galaxy who can set up such a large array? The Divine Master narrowed his eyes and revealed a trace of surprise. In his opinion, whether it was a heaven-breaking cultivator or a heaven-breaking formation Divine Master, such existences could only exist in the 100 Outer Territories. It was impossible for them to exist in the lower realm. The Grand Divine Master was already a genius. He was the #1 array formation master in the Golden Corner Galaxy for countless years. However, the Grand Divine Master's level ultimately stopped at the peak of the half-step heaven-breaking level. He could not set up a large array that surpassed his own level. However, he was now at the border of the galaxy and had seen a large array that surpassed the lower realm. Although this large array was simply full of loopholes in the eyes of the mighty figures in the 100 outer territories, it was already a kind of miracle in the lower realm. This galaxy is not simple. Someone's array formation skills must have reached the heaven-breaking level. That's why they can set up such a large array. Chapter 3653. Divine Master, you're right. With the Snake Shadow Divine Staff, not to mention this simple and crude great formation, even if a heaven-breaking realm elite appeared in this starry sky recently, you can easily destroy that guy. The great God Master laughed loudly. The Divine Lord curled his lips, and his eyes were filled with pride. Gong Ji Lu had demonstrated the power of the Snake Shadow Divine Staff to him, and he knew how terrifying it was. Even if he could only unleash a portion of the staff's power, it was enough to make him invincible in the lower realm. The guy who had just broken through the heaven-breaking realm was nothing in front of the Snake Shadow Divine Staff. He really didn't take him seriously. Divine Master, please destroy this formation. The Grand Divine Master knelt on one knee. Then, the 49 Divine Protectors and the mechanical beings on the deck all knelt on the ground and shouted in unison. The Divine Master nodded, took out the Snake Shadow Divine Staff, and twisted it gently. A dazzling golden light burst out from the surface of the Divine Staff, and the golden light intertwined to form a giant python that shot out and charged toward the formation at the edge of the natural moat. Boom! Inside the formation, under the shocked gazes of many cultivators, the indestructible defensive formation shook violently. Then, it only lasted for 3 breaths of time before it was destroyed. They all knew that this defensive formation was personally set up by Zhuowen, and it was said that it could barely reach the heaven-breaking stage. Originally, this level of formation would have no problem defending the Golden Universe army for a period of time. But now, wasn't it a little too fast? That's a heaven-breaking divine artifact. I really didn't expect that the Divine Master of Golden Universe would have such a divine artifact. This is really unexpected. The Black King's face was solemn, and his eyes were full of fear. Although San Qing's face was gloomy, he wasn't particularly worried. He smiled faintly and said, Master Zhuo also has a divine artifact. With Master Zhuo's strength, it won't be difficult for him to deal with this Divine Master. The Black King and the other Patriarch-level elites also nodded. They had all seen Zhuowen's strength on Mount Sanqing. Even though the Divine Master of Golden Universe Star had indeed been very strong, they already had blind confidence in Zhuon. Zhuon remained silent, but his heart slowly sank. The 3 Pure Ones were not clear about the aura of the heaven-breaking divine artifact, but he was well aware of the principles behind it. When God Lord Golden Corner took out the Snake Shadow Divine Staff, he knew something was wrong. This was because he could sense an aura from the Snake Shadow Divine Staff that was even more powerful than the 9 Tribulations Divine Sword. He knew that this Snake Shadow Divine Staff was definitely a heaven-breaking divine weapon of a higher grade than the 9 Tribulations Divine Sword. At the very least, it was a heaven-breaking divine artifact that was above heaven-breaking Stage 3. After the formation was destroyed, God Lord Golden Corner led the Great God Master and 49 God Protectors out of the spaceship and slowly stepped into the circling star border. Behind God Lord Golden Corner and the others, soldiers swarmed forward in an orderly fashion. Of course, God Lord Golden Corner had brought too many troops, so only 2/3 of the troops had followed them in. The rest of the troops were still on the spaceship. Divine Lord Golden Corner was not in a hurry to attack. Instead, he looked at the many cultivators on Zhuowen's side and said faintly, Everyone in the wandering galaxy, I am the Divine Lord of Golden Corner Galaxy. Seeing you all mustering such a large force, you should also know the purpose of this Lord's arrival. I know that a heaven-breaking realm powerhouse appeared in your wandering galaxy some time ago. However, I can clearly tell you all that even a heaven-breaking realm powerhouse won't be a match for one of my moves. I, God Lord Golden Corner, am not an unreasonable person. As long as you all surrender to our Golden Corner Galaxy and give up a large area of the wandering galaxy to our Golden Corner Galaxy, I cannot make a move and will even bestow a small part of the place for you all to live in. God Lord Golden Corner's voice was not loud, but it resounded clearly in everyone's ears. Zhuan, 3 pure ones, and the others all revealed puzzled looks. This God Lord Golden Corner actually said that a heaven-breaking realm powerhouse appeared in their wandering galaxy. But how was this possible? Their wandering galaxy's strongest powerhouse was Zhu. However, although Zhuan's strength was strong, his cultivation had yet to break through the heavens. Zhuan thought of the primordial chaos path. He had once heard Su Yuan say that the primordial chaos path's appearance was mostly due to the symbol of the first heaven-breaking realm appearing in the lower realm's starry skies. Back then, he accidentally opened up the primordial chaos path. The commotion was not small. Hence, it was seen by Gong Ji Lu and the others, and that was why they had such a conjecture. What does your Golden Corner galaxy count for, also daring to invade our wandering galaxy? You, God Lord Golden Corner, what right do you have to be so pretentious? With our Lord Zhu around, you're simply trash. Who gave you the confidence to make us surrender? Right. Our Lord Zhu is invincible. God Lord Golden Corner's voice had just faded when it aroused public anger. The cultivators of the wandering galaxy could not resist retorting. God Lord Golden Corner's gaze was calm, not caring about others rebuking, but said indifferently, Lord Zhu? Looks like you all hold this Lord Zhu in high esteem. Since he's really so strong, then have that so-called Lord Zhu come out and exchange moves with me. I wonder if he can take one move from me? The people of the wandering galaxy all quieted down, involuntarily turning their gazes to the rear, Yuan who was with the 3 pure ones, Black King and the others. Their gazes were filled with fanaticism. Looks like you're the Lord Zhu they're talking about. God Lord Golden Corner's gaze followed everyone's gazes, landing on Zhuan at the rear, his expression strange. He originally thought that the guy whom the people of the wandering galaxy held in such high esteem should be the heaven-breaking realm elite who had just appeared. But what disappointed him was that although this Lord Zhu's aura was not weak, he was merely around the late-stage 5th blight. The gap with the heaven-breaking realm was really too great. Such trash could also be held in such high esteem in the wandering galaxy. Looks like he still overestimated the battle prowess of this wandering galaxy. The so-called Lord Zhu you all speak of is too weak. I want to find the strongest in your galaxy, don't just pick some trash for me. God Lord Golden Corner said somewhat impatiently. The moment these words came out, the people of the wandering galaxy were furious. The one you want to find is our wandering galaxy's first heaven-breaking realm elite, right? Zhuan suddenly spoke. The surrounding clamor immediately became much quieter. God Lord Golden Corner also finally sized up Zhuan properly because of this. Looks like you know some things. What you said is right, I'm indeed looking for that guy right now. Your wandering galaxy is too weak. Even if a heaven-breaking realm powerhouse appeared by chance, so what? In front of me, that's also a lamb-like existence waiting to be slaughtered, God Lord Golden Corner said indifferently. God Lord Golden Corner's words pulled everyone's wrath again. But Zhuan was very calm. He said coolly, it's really a coincidence, that person is precisely my master. If you want to find my master, that will have to depend on your ability. Pass through me first. The 3 purities, Black King, and the rest were all stunned, their gazes revealing puzzlement. They had never heard before that Zhuan still had a master. However, looking at Zhuan's serious appearance, they could not help somewhat believing. The time of Zhuan's rise was too fast until it made them all feel that it was unrealistic. Actually, regarding Zhuan's rise, the 3 purities they all also had some conjectures. Chapter 3654. 3 pure ones had even deeper experience. He had obtained a heaven-breaking grade cultivation method like the purple extreme spirit art from Zhuan. At that time, he still did not understand how Zhuan, a being from the lower realm, could have a heaven-breaking grade cultivation method and even a heaven-breaking grade divine tool. Now, he finally figured it out. Looks like the master behind Lord Zhu is definitely an expert. Most likely, even in the heaven-breaking realm, he's also a rather powerful existence. Three pure ones thought, lost in thought. Naturally, Zhuowen didn't know that his casual words would cause many people to fantasize. He only wanted to hide his own secret. If others knew that he could open the primordial chaos path before breaking heaven, wouldn't this be very easy for others to suspect that he had a great secret? And Golden Corner God Lord insisted on finding that so-called heaven-breaking realm expert. Then Zhuowen naturally also planned to go with the flow and make up this story. Your master? Golden Corner God Lord sized up Zhuowen, and suddenly laughed loudly and said, You want to test my methods for your master? But I have to remind you, with a piece of trash like you, I think you can't even take half a move from me, and you still want to seek your own death? Zhuowen said somewhat impatiently, Aren't you annoying, talking a lot of nonsense? I haven't seen you have any real ability until now, but you're quite glib with your mouth. Could it be that you only know how to brag there? Golden Corner God Lord's expression was gloomy. Was this brat in front of him tired of living, actually daring to speak to him like this? Since this boy is that heaven-breaking realm cultivator's disciple, then I'll kill this boy on the spot right now, and should be able to force that guy out. Thinking here, Golden Corner God Lord's eyes were filled with killing intent. The only thing he was wary of now was that heaven-breaking realm cultivator who had just appeared in the spiraling starry sky. If they met force with force, he had a certain certainty of heavily injuring or even killing that heaven-breaking realm cultivator using the snake shadow divine staff. What he was most afraid of was that heaven-breaking realm cultivator not daring to show himself, and then when his army entered the depths of the spiraling starry sky to fight, if that guy suddenly came out and attacked their army, it would definitely cause a huge impact to their army. After all, God Lord Golden Corner had yet to break through the heavens. He relied on the snake shadow divine staff to obtain such great power. And besides strength, breaking heaven realm cultivator's movement techniques and methods were much more brilliant than his. If that fellow did not choose to clash head-on, Golden Corner Divine Lord would also find it difficult to deal with a genuine heaven-breaking realm cultivator. Moreover, if a heaven-breaking realm cultivator resorted to guerrilla warfare, it would simply be a disaster for their Golden Corner Starry Sky army. It was precisely in order to smoothly take down spiraling Starry Sky that Divine Lord Golden Corner wanted to provoke that heaven-breaking realm cultivator at the first possible moment, and it would be best if he could kill him. Gradually, the armies of the circling Starry Sky and the Golden Corner Starry Sky began to lean towards the edge, leaving a huge empty space in the middle. Zhuowen and God Lord Golden Corner stood at opposite ends of the empty space, gazing at each other from afar. Bastard son, you really have guts? You know that I have a Heaven Breaker divine artifact, yet you still dare to fight me. I really don't know where your courage comes from. God Lord Golden Corner chuckled coldly. I should be the one saying that. You're clearly at death's door, yet you still want to provoke me. Are you tired of living? Zhuowen said indifferently. Your eloquence isn't bad, but I want to see how many moves you can take from me. God Lord Golden Corner did not waste any more words. He stomped his right foot, and his entire person swept over like a bolt of lightning, appearing in front of Zhuowen in the blink of an eye. The snake shadow divine staff floated around God Lord Golden Corner, but he did not use it to attack. Instead, he let it revolve around his body, forming a defense. In his view, dealing with a mere late-stage fifth blight guy, there was no need to use the snake shadow divine staff at all. God Lord Golden Corner's right hand formed a palm and blasted out across space. A blood-colored light appeared in the center of his palm. This blood-colored light intertwined together, spewing out a blazing blood-colored shock wave, instantly enveloping Zhuowen's entire person. God Lord Golden Corner floated in midair, his arms crossed, his eyes full of mockery. Reckless guy, insisting on coming out to court death. Now you've tasted suffering. God Lord Golden Corner shook his head and sneered disdainfully. But very soon, God Lord Golden Corner realized that something was wrong. He abruptly turned around and discovered that Zhuowen had appeared not far behind him at some point, only to see 9 divine swords revolved around Zhuowen's body. Each divine sword emitted a resplendent light, suffusing with a terrifying aura. The instant God Lord Golden Corner noticed Zhuowen, the corners of Zhuowen's mouth revealed a cold smile. The 9 divine swords around him transformed into 9 streaks of sword light, instantly landing on God Lord Golden Corner's body. Bang, bang, bang. Countless sparks exploded around God Lord Golden Corner. The attacks of the 9 Tribulations divine sword were all blocked by the Snake Shadow divine staff. But the 9 Tribulations divine sword was a heaven-piercing rank 2 divine artifact after all. Its power was extraordinary. The powerful thrust passed through the Snake Shadow divine staff's defensive circle with an invisible ripple of energy and slammed into God Lord Golden Corner's body. Poochie! God Lord Golden Corner gave a muffled groan and vomited a mouthful of blood, involuntarily retreating repeatedly. No wonder it's a heaven-piercing rank 3 divine artifact. Its defensive power is really strong. One muttered to himself, but his movements were not slow at all. The sword finger of his right hand landed on his glabella and abruptly extracted one of the 3 divine soul sword essences that his original body had left in advance in the divine soul of his doppelganger. A terrifying sword essence swept across the starry sky. The surrounding cultivators who sensed this sword essence all felt a bone-piercing chill and fear. Zhuowen's right hand sword finger suddenly drew back from his glabella. Instantly, a golden sword light flashed and disappeared. Clusters of green flames burned on the surface of the sword light. The sword light was extremely fast. As soon as it appeared, it blasted toward God Lord Golden Corner. Boom! The moment this sword light came into contact with the Snake Shadow divine staff beside God Lord Golden Corner, countless sword shadows exploded. At the same time, the terrifying green flames, like a fire dragon, instantly engulfed God Lord Golden Corner's surroundings. Moreover, the range of the green flames grew fiercer and fiercer, rapidly spreading in all directions. A portion of the Golden Corner Starry Sky army that was relatively close had already been affected. Anyone who came into contact with the green flames was basically reduced to ashes within a few moments of struggling. Everyone, use the transportation talisman and leave this place quickly. Zhuowen's gaze was grave as he hurriedly transmitted a message to everyone present. The divine soul sword essence's power was truly terrifying. The green flames that spread had such a wide range, instantly enveloping thousands of kilometers and showing no signs of stopping. After receiving Zhuowen's message, the cultivators circling the starry sky all crushed the transportation talisman in their hands and turned into streaks of white light, disappearing from where they were. As for Zhuowen, before he crushed the teleportation talisman, he quickly used 3 great divine abilities and blasted them to where God Lord Golden Corner was. Chapter 3655. Gongji Lu and An stood quietly on the deck of the divine ship and looked indifferently at the edge of the moat in the distance. They saw God Lord Golden Corner use the Snake Shadow divine staff and easily destroy the defensive array at the edge of the moat. Then he led the army into the moat. Oh, I actually saw an acquaintance in the army traveling through the starry sky. Gongji Lu's gaze fell on the moat. He was startled at first, but then his lips curled into a cold smile. An was startled and asked in surprise, "Senior brother, who is the acquaintance you're talking about?" Gongji Lu pointed in a direction. An looked over and saw Zhuowen in the army. At this moment, Zhuowen had already walked out and was talking to God Lord Golden Corner. So it's this guy. He's not simple. Back then, he could actually dodge your sneak attack. Even among the 5th Blight cultivators, he's considered a top elite. An nodded in realization and then changed the topic. However, in front of God Lord Golden Corner, who has the Snake Shadow divine staff, his little bit of strength is no different from paper. Gongji Lu smiled faintly. This person is not worth mentioning. I'm mainly worried about the guy who opened the primordial path. Among the cultivators facing the Golden Corner Starry Sky army, I didn't sense any heaven-breaking realm cultivator's aura. Obviously, that guy didn't show up. An's pretty face also became slightly serious. In the starry sky, the only thing they were wary of was the heaven-breaking cultivator who had just opened the primordial path. They had absolute confidence in the Snake Shadow divine staff, but they were afraid that the heaven-breaking cultivator would engage in guerrilla warfare with the Golden Corner's Starry Sky army. Then it would be very troublesome. If that heaven-breaking cultivator didn't fight God Lord Golden Corner head-on, it was obviously not very possible for God Lord Golden Corner to rely on the Snake Shadow Divine Staff to destroy that heaven-breaking cultivator. Senior brother, look at that guy. He actually dares to challenge God Lord Golden Corner and actually plans to fight him. Is he courting death? An IC suddenly asked with a strange expression. Gong Jilu also noticed the confrontation between Zhuowen and God Lord Golden Corner in the distance. He was startled at first, then he shook his head and said, "Newborn calves are truly fearless. Back then, I thought that this guy came from the 100 Outer Realms, so I was a bit afraid of him. Now it seems like this kid is simply a native living being that's roaming the starry sky. However, he has fragmented godly power, so he should have a lot of secrets on him. After God Lord Golden Corner cripples this child, I will send him a message. There is no need to kill him, just let him hand this child over to us." However, as Gong Lv spoke, he suddenly discovered that something was amiss. That was because there was no movement from NIC. When he looked at NIC, he realized that she was petrified. She stood on the spot and stared blankly at the natural moat. Gong Jilu followed NIC's gaze and saw the battle between Zhuowen and Golden Corner Godlord. In the blink of an eye, Divine Lord Golden Corner was enveloped by terrifying sword intent. Soon after, countless blue flames spread out, affecting the surrounding Golden Corner Starry Sky army. Then, behind the blue flames, there was an even more terrifying explosion. Gong Lv's face darkened. He could tell at a glance that the explosive energy came from the self-destruction of a large formation. Moreover, the self-destruction of this large formation was definitely a heaven-breaking level 1 killing formation, and there was more than one killing formation. At that moment, the border of the natural moat's depths had already turned into an exploding hell. Countless violent energies spread out, desperately releasing energy as if they wanted to destroy everything in their path. There are at least 3 heaven-breaking level 1 killing formations. Who did this? Could this be a backup plan of that heaven-breaking cultivator? NIC's pretty face was slightly pale, and her expression was very ugly. Gong Lve frowned slightly. He thought of Zhuowen, who had fought with God Lord Golden Corner. These 3 heaven-breaking level 1 killing formations had been set up by that guy? The short exchange of blows just now had truly shocked Gong Jilu. That was why he suspected that the self-detonation grand formation was secretly set up by Zhuowen. Senior brother, that God Lord Golden Corner couldn't have been killed by the explosion, right? NIC frowned as she looked at the scene of the explosion in the distance. She was a little worried. That won't be the case. The power of the Snake Shadow Divine Staff is more than that. Unless that God Lord Golden Corner is a good-for-nothing, how could he have been killed by the self-destruction of a heaven-breaking level 1 killing formation? Gong Lve shook his head. As soon as Gong Lve finished speaking, the terrifying explosion at the border of the natural moat in the distance suddenly swept out a huge snake shadow. The snake shadow circled around in the air, and the terrifying explosive energy that was spreading continuously dissipated into thin air. God Lord Golden Corner walked out in an extremely sorry state. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was so angry that he was almost trembling. In particular, he saw that the army that had entered the natural moat had almost been completely wiped out. Even the divine guardians who had followed him had suffered heavy casualties. Splat. The Grand Divine Master standing beside God Lord Golden Corner suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He knelt on the ground, and his face was extremely pale. "Thank you, God Lord, for saving us at the last moment," the Grand Divine Master said shakily. The moment the 3 arrays had self-destructed, God Lord Golden Corner had immediately activated the power of the Snake Shadow Divine Staff to protect the Grand Divine Master and the Divine Guardians who were closer. The great Divine Masters and Divine Protectors that were protected by him basically kept their lives, but they all suffered very serious injuries. What made God Lord Golden Corner tremble with anger was that the divine guardians he had failed to protect had basically all perished. He had brought a total of 49 divine guardians with him, but now there were only 7 or 8 left, and all of them were defeated soldiers. Then, how dare you trick me? I will definitely capture you and cut you into 1,000 pieces. I will pull out your tendons and skin you alive. I will make you wish you were dead. God Lord Golden Corner was fuming with anger as he roared. He had already heard of Zhuowen's name from the discussions of the cultivators who had roamed the galaxy earlier. Now, he'd completely lost his rationality due to anger. He didn't even care about Zhuowen's so-called master, and was about to make his way to the depths of spiraling galaxy. As long as he saw any living being, he would slaughter them all. God Lord Golden Corner, you'd better calm down. Suddenly, an indifferent voice sounded, causing the furious God Lord Golden Corner to regain some of his rationality. Gong Kilyu had steered the divine ship to the edge of the natural moat. Because he had not severed his cultivation, he did not dare to step into the range of the galaxy. Lord Gong, this lowly one got off to a bad start. I have embarrassed myself in front of you. God Lord Golden Corner immediately knelt on one knee and repented. This is not your fault. Even I did not expect that Zhuan to be so secretive. Not only does he have a heaven-breaking divine artifact, but he also has a heaven-breaking array. Gong Kilyu shook his head, not blaming God Lord Golden Corner. God Lord Golden Corner finally came to his senses. He recalled Zhuowen's methods and could not help but break out in cold sweat. Chapter 3656. You're wavering, God Lord Golden Corner? Gong Ji Lu glanced at God Lord Golden Corner. I wouldn't dare, but I'm a little worried. His so-called master is already so powerful, so wouldn't his master be? God Lord Golden Corner said worriedly. What are you afraid of with my snake shadow staff? A third-grade heaven-crushing divine artifact is enough to kill any living being in this part of the galaxy. You failed just now mainly because you were careless. If you had used the snake shadow staff to attack Zhuowen from the start, you wouldn't have been the one to lose, but Tuan. No matter how powerful his master is, he won't be able to surpass level 2 Heaven Breaker, so he won't be a threat to you. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? Gong Ji Lu said sternly. God Lord Golden Corner felt Gong Ji Lu's sharp gaze and couldn't help but tremble. I know I was wrong. I'll lead the army and attack the interior of Galaxy Traveler. Gong Ji Lu shook his head and said coldly, Fool! 2/3 of the army you brought with you has been annihilated, and the divine masters and divine protectors are either dead or injured. Isn't it suicide to go there in such a state? What you should do next is to reorganize the army, then treat the injured. Once the army has recovered, then attack. Furthermore, your Golden Corner Galaxy army no longer has an absolute advantage over Galaxy Traveler. Your best strategy now is to slowly encroach on Galaxy Traveler's territory. You'll need to fight a prolonged battle. Once most of Galaxy Traveler's territory is in your pocket, you'll have won. God Lord Golden Corner slapped his forehead as if he had been enlightened. He hurriedly bowed to Gong Ji Lu and began to reorganize the army. Then he began to use Galaxy Traveler's technology as a base to build a huge mechanical fortress within Galaxy Traveler's range. Meanwhile, the Divine Masters set up half-step Heaven Breaker formations around Galaxy Traveler's territory to prevent Galaxy Traveler's army from ambushing them. Outside the Heavenly Chasm, the army that was roaming the starry sky quietly floated in midair, while Zhuowen stood at the front of the army. He looked down at the depths of Galaxy Traveler's territory, and his expression became more and more solemn. He had left many surveillance arrays at the natural moat. Although many of them were damaged by the explosion, the surveillance arrays in the remote areas were still intact. Through the surveillance formation, he realized that the Golden Corner Starry Sky army that had entered the natural moat was almost completely annihilated. However, the God Masters, Great God Masters, and 7 to 8 Divine Guardians were still alive. Although he had destroyed many of the main forces of the Golden Cosmic Starry Sky, the current lineup of the Golden Cosmic Starry Sky was still stronger than Zhuowen's side. This was because he found that the weakest of the 7 or 8 divine law protectors were at the mid-stage of the 5th blight and the strongest had reached the level of the 3 pure ones. Now that Zhuan's original body was not present, his strength was greatly reduced. Even with the divine weapon 9 Tribulations divine sword, he was not a match for Golden Corner Divine Lord's Snake Shadow divine staff. The current him could barely deal with God Lord Golden Corner. On his side, the 5th blight only had Green Hat, Eastern Emperor Tai Yi, and 3 pure ones. The difference in high-end strength was too great. If they really fought, Golden Corner Starry Sky would still be able to beat Wandering Starry Sky. Sigh. What exactly did I do inside the ruthless and desireless bead? Why haven't I come back yet? Zhuan was a little anxious. He was very confident that if his original body came back, he would be able to suppress God Lord Golden Corner by relying on his powerful spirit power and 9 Tribulations divine sword. As expected of Lord Zhua, you actually came up with such a plan to catch the army of Golden Cosmic Starry Sky off guard. With such a huge explosion just now, I'm afraid that all the God Lords and Great God Masters in Golden Cosmic Starry Sky are dead. Now is the best time for us to counterattack. The Black King's eyes were full of light, and his expression was full of excitement. 3 pure ones, demon saints, and the others were also moved. Although they had not experienced the power of the explosion, even from afar, they could still feel the sense of suffocation and death brought about by the explosion. The explosion was so powerful that it could kill a heaven-breaking transformation elite. No matter how powerful God Lord Golden Corner was, he would be seriously injured. Zhuan waved his sleeve, and the images collected by the surveillance array immediately appeared in front of everyone. When everyone saw that God Lord Golden Corner, Great God Masters, and the others were still alive and kicking, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The fighting spirit that had been born just now had completely disappeared at this moment. After all, our Wandering Starry Sky has not been developed for long, and the gap between us and Golden Cosmic Starry Sky is not small. Now, all we can do is defend. If we attack rashly, we will be defeated. Zhuan sighed and began to arrange everyone. He arranged all the combat forces to the heaven-accessing secret land so that they could unite and command at any time. Once the army of Golden Cosmic Starry Sky started to attack, all the troops would be deployed by the heaven-accessing secret land. Everyone knew the gap between them and the enemy, so they did not object to Zhuan's proposal to defend. However, everyone's face was full of worry. They all knew that if they kept defending, they would lose. If they kept defending like this, they would eventually be nibbled away by Golden Cosmic Starry Sky, and in the end, Wandering Starry Sky might really change hands. Everyone, please don't lose confidence and hope. The reason why I asked you to defend is not to let you sit and wait for death, but to let you stall for time. Zhuan took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. As soon as these words came out, 3 pure ones, Demon Saint, and all the others raised their heads and looked at Zhuan in confusion. I told you. I have a master, and he is a real heaven-breaking realm expert, much stronger than me. But he left Wandering Starry Sky for some reason. As long as he finishes that matter, he will come back. As long as my master can come back, then all the creatures in Golden Cosmic Starry Sky are nothing but chickens and pottery dogs, unable to withstand a single blow. So, I need you to stall for time with all your might. Zhuan's voice became loud and clear, and his eyes were full of determination. These words were like a spark that ignited the wilderness, and instantly ignited the fighting spirit in everyone's hearts. The hope in their hearts was also ignited at this moment. Lord Zhua, don't worry, we will definitely defend Wandering Starry Sky. We will stall for enough time for your master. Everyone knelt on one knee, and their eyes regained their determination. Wandering Starry Sky was their home. As long as they had hope in their hearts, they would never let their home fall into the hands of others and be trampled on at will. At this moment, everyone's actions and thoughts were very consistent, and that was to defend their home. Zhuan, on the other hand, was somewhat troubled. The master he spoke of was actually his main body. However, he was helpless because he did not know how long it would take for his original body to come back. Everything was unknown. Chapter 3657. In the inner world of the pearl, one flew past the illusory land and arrived at the oasis at the end of the land. He stood on the hill closest to the oasis and looked ahead. Everything in the oasis was within Zhuo Wen's eyes. The oasis wasn't big and Zhuo didn't find any signs of life. The most eye-catching thing in the oasis was a huge lake in the middle of the oasis. What was eye-catching was that the water quality of the lake wasn't normal. It was a mix of 7 different colors and looked like a rainbow lake. In the middle of the rainbow lake, there was an exquisite and beautiful pavilion floating in the air. In addition, he also saw a 7-colored stone tablet standing on the shore of the 7-colored lake. The stone tablet was about 10 feet tall and had an irregular rectangular shape. There were 7 words carved on the surface of the stone tablet. They were happiness, anger, worry, thought, sorrow, fear, and shock. When Zhuan landed in front of the 7 emotions tablet, he suddenly heard a soft voice that kept reverberating around him. 7 emotions tablet, 6 desires ring. Whoever obtains one of them will receive half of the Sacred Master of Rainbow's 6 desires inheritance. If both are acknowledged, you will receive all of the Sacred Master's inheritance. The loser will die. The voice sounded like a man's or a woman's. It was very gentle, like a spring breeze. However, Zhuan felt a chill and killing intent. 7 emotions tablet, 6 desires ring. Zhuan looked at the 7 emotions tablet in front of him. Other than that, he didn't see any 6 desires ring. At the same time, his gaze fell on the pavilion in the middle of the rainbow lake and he fell into deep thought. Then his eyes lit up. He guessed that the so-called inheritance of the 7-colored 6 desires, Saint Lord, should be in the pavilion in the sky. Although he didn't know what level the Sacred Master of Rainbow 6 desires was at, he was definitely much more powerful than him. The Sacred Master of Rainbow 6 desires inheritance must be extraordinary. He also guessed that in order to enter the pavilion in the sky, he had to be acknowledged by the 7 emotions tablet and 6 desires ring. Now, he only saw the 7 emotions tablet and didn't see the 6 desires ring. Obviously, someone had taken the 6 desires ring before him. Within the merciless, desireless pearl, the only one who had entered before him was Moyan Wushang. It's very likely that Wushang is in that pavilion in the sky. Zhuowen's lips curled into a smile, but he did not impulsively enter the castle in the air. He had already observed the 7-colored lake and the pavilion in the sky. The surroundings were filled with powerful and profound formations and restrictions. These array formations and restrictions already exceeded the scope of Zhuowen's understanding. If he casually barged in, then he would definitely be dead for sure. At the thought of this, Zhuowen's gaze fell on the 7 emotions tablet. He knew that if he wanted to enter the pavilion in the sky, he had to obtain the 7 emotions steel and obtain its approval. Only then would he be able to enter the pavilion in the sky. He sat cross-legged in front of the 7 emotions steel as his spiritual force entered the 7 emotions steel. Suddenly, he felt as if his entire body was being pulled by a suction force, as if he was being pulled into a strange space. This strange space was similar to the mortal world of the mortal world. At this moment, Zhuowen had become an insignificant mortal in the world of mortals. His role in the world of mortals was constantly changing, and the trajectory of his life was also as different as heaven and earth, each with its own unique characteristics. Sometimes, he was an orphan in the slums who had no one to rely on. He was looked down upon and despised by others. Sometimes, he was a member of the royal family, the descendant of the emperor. He was born in a noble family, indulging in luxury and experiencing the prosperity of the mortal world. Sometimes, he was an old monk in an ancient temple, abstaining from meat and reciting Buddhist scriptures until he died of old age alone. In the 7 emotions steel, he had experienced the joys and sorrows of the mortal world. He had experienced the alternation of the 7 emotions in the mortal world, and the cycle of reincarnation was endless. Finally, one day, as a woodcutter, he went deep into the forest, crossed mountains and rivers, and arrived at the end of the world. He threw the axe in his hand to the sky and roared. He laughed heartily, as if he was mocking the heavens and the earth. A sharp thunderbolt pierced through the sky and lit up the entire world. In the end, it landed on the woodcutter's head. The moment Zhuan closed his eyes, the entire world was distorted and annihilated, and he opened his eyes. He saw that a sharp spike had appeared in front of him unknowingly, and it was an inch away from his glabella. As long as he moved forward slightly, the spike would pierce through his glabella and completely penetrate his head. Zhuan subconsciously took a few steps back, and his eyes narrowed as he looked at the spike. He then realized that the spike was actually derived from the center of the 7 emotions steel. At that moment, the spike slowly retracted into the 7 emotions steel. Then, the 7 emotions steel gradually became smaller, and finally became the size of a palm, and it landed in Zhuan's palm. Zhuan could feel that there was a subtle connection between him and the 7 emotions steel. Moreover, he realized that the 7 emotions steel was very unusual. It contained an extremely strange and powerful aura. He suspected that the 7 emotions steel should be a divine weapon, but he didn't know what level it was. However, he knew that the 7 emotions steel's level was definitely much higher than his 9 tribulations sword formation. At the very least, he still didn't know how to use the 7 emotions steel at the moment. The spike that was derived from the surface of the 7 emotions steel appeared in Zhuan's mind. He knew that if he woke up a moment later, he would really be killed by the 7 emotions steel. It seemed that comprehending the 7 emotions steel was extremely risky. If he didn't wake up within the stipulated time, he would really be dead. What made Zhuan even more speechless was that the 7 emotions steel didn't give him any hint at all. If he continued to stay in the mortal world of the 7 emotions steel and didn't wake up, he might not even know how he died. Let's enter the pavilion in the sky first. Zhuan shook his head and took a step forward, stepping into the 7 colors lake. The densely packed restrictions around the 7 colors lake rippled when they came into contact with Zhuan, but there were no signs of them attacking. Zhuan heaved a sigh of relief. He knew that it was all thanks to the 7 emotions steel. He stepped on the surface of the lake and soon arrived at the center of the lake. He stomped his right foot and flew up, landing on the steps in front of the pavilion in the sky. Zhuan opened the front door easily. The pavilion in the sky only had 1 floor and it didn't look very big. In fact, it was indeed so. When Zhuan entered the pavilion, the layout inside was very simple. In the center of the pavilion, there was a very long screen that divided the pavilion into 2. In the room, other than the huge screen, there was only a table in the middle. On the table, there was a dim yellow scroll. Zhuan's gaze wasn't on the scroll, but on the screen in front of him. He saw a very familiar figure on the screen. The figure had her back facing him and was sitting cross-legged behind the screen as if she was meditating and cultivating. From the silhouette of the figure, he could tell that it was a woman. Wu Shang! Zhuan hurriedly shouted, trying to attract the attention of the woman behind the screen. He was too familiar with the figure. It was Moyan Wushang's figure. However, what made Zhuan feel strange was that Moyan Wushang didn't react to his loud voice. It was as if he didn't hear him at all. Chapter 3658. Bang! Suddenly, a strong wave came from the screen and landed on Zhuan's arm and body. Zhuan spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backward. He landed heavily on the ground. What a powerful array! Zhuan slowly got up and looked at the screen that had returned to normal. His eyes were filled with fear. It seemed that there was a powerful restriction on the screen. Whatever he did would not affect Moyan Wushang on the other side of the screen. However, Zhuan knew that since he could see Moyan Wushang's shadow, Moyan Wushang should be able to see him as well. When Moyan Wushang came out of seclusion, he should be able to notice him. Thinking of this, Zhuan stopped wasting his time. Instead, he walked up to the table, picked up the scroll, and slowly unfurled it. 7 Emotions Tablet Seal. Zhuan skimmed through the scroll and realized that the contents of the scroll were basically about the secret method to cultivate the 7 Emotions Tablet Seal. The 7 Emotions Tablet Seal could only be cultivated with the help of the 7 Emotions Tablet. It was an extremely powerful secret method. The scroll also introduced some details about the 7 Emotions Tablet. Zhuan found out that the 7 Emotions Tablet was a divine weapon of a very high grade. However, it was not an offensive divine weapon. It was a support-type divine weapon. It was used to cultivate the 7 Emotions Tablet seal. Other than that, the 7 Emotions Tablet was useless. Zhou felt a little helpless. In other words, even if he had the 7 Emotions Tablet, he did not have the cultivation method of the 7 Emotions Tablet imprint. In that case, this item was completely useless. However, the 7 Emotions Tablet seal was very detailed. It also emphasized how powerful the 7 Emotions Tablet seal was. Zhou took one last look at the figure on the screen and turned his attention back to the scroll. The 7 Emotions Tablet seal was powerful. It was a secret method that surpassed all the superpowers that he had. Hence, he decided to comprehend it first. The 7 Emotions Tablet seal was divided into 7 levels. They corresponded to the happiness, anger, worry, longing, sorrow, fear, and shock seals. Not only did these 7 seals possess boundless power, but when the 7 seals were used, they would also stir up the enemy's emotions to the greatest extent, causing them to be thrown into confusion. Among the 7 great seals, the seal of happiness was the weakest and also the easiest to cultivate. As for the seal of shock, it was the most powerful and also the most difficult 7th-level secret technique. Before he looked at the scroll, Zhuan thought that he would be able to comprehend the entire 7 Emotions Tablet imprint in a short period of time. However, when he really tried to cultivate it, he realized that the 7 Emotions Tablet imprint was far more complicated than he had imagined. According to the description in the scroll, those with good talent could cultivate the seal of happiness in 10,000 years, the seal of wrath in 100,000 years, and so on. Finally, it was said that the seal of shock would take 10 million years to cultivate. It could be said that although the might of the 7 Emotions Tablet imprint was terrifying, the harsh conditions to cultivate it and the long time it took to cultivate it had reached an unimaginable level. When Zhuan began to cultivate the seal of happiness, he did encounter some obstacles. Fortunately, his talent was indeed extraordinary. Coupled with the 7 Emotions Tablet imprint, his cultivation speed was steady and steady. Even so, when he cultivated the seal of happiness to the small success, it took him 2 years. If he wanted to reach the great success, it would take him more than 10 years. Zhuan finally knew that the difficulty of cultivating this secret technique was not groundless. After all, his comprehension had merged with the primordial stone. His divine soul and comprehension were extraordinary. Normally, when he cultivated a divine ability, he would be able to completely master it in less than half a month. However, it took him 2 years to cultivate the seal of happiness to the small success. This was indeed quite a shock to him. Zhuan did not continue cultivating. Instead, he turned his head to look at the screen. He realized that the figure behind the screen had already disappeared. Zhuan quickly kept the scroll, opened the door of the pavilion, and hurried out. He knew that Moyan Wushang had come out of seclusion. As long as she came out of seclusion, she would definitely see his back. Sure enough, when he walked out of the door, he saw a beautiful figure on the shore of the 7 Colors Lake. This beautiful figure's beautiful eyes had been staring at the pavilion in the air. When Zhuan opened the door, she was obviously stunned. "Brother Zhua!" Moyan Wushang's beautiful eyes were strange. She could not help but call out Zhuan's name. "It's really Wushang." Zhuan was full of surprise. He jumped out of the pavilion and walked on the water. When he reached the shore, he jumped lightly and landed in front of Moyan Wushang. "Brother Zhua, how did you come in?" Moyan Wushang asked in surprise and joy. "Actually, it's like this." Zhuowen pulled Moyan Wushang and sat him down on the grass. He told Moyan Wushang how he entered this place and what he had experienced here. He told Moyan Wushang everything. After listening, Moyan Wushang's beautiful eyes flashed with a trace of gentleness. She said somewhat reproachfully, "Brother Zhua, you are really stupid. You don't even know how dangerous the Heartless Pearl is and you dare to come in. What if an accident happens?" "Compared to an accident, I don't want to regret it," Zhuowen said with a smile. Moyan Wushang was stunned. When she came back to her senses, a part of her heart was touched. She could not help but have tears in her eyes. However, she quickly concealed her emotions and changed the topic. Brother Zhua, you should have obtained the 7 emotions steel, right? You should have obtained half of the 7 emotions 6 desires Saint Master's inheritance, right? Zhuan nodded and took out the palm-sized 7 emotions steel and the scroll from the spiritual ring. He handed them to Moyan Wushang and said, "Yes. Wushang, take these too. You should be more suitable than me to obtain the complete inheritance of the 7 emotions 6 desires Saint Master." Moyan Wushang pushed the 7 emotions steel and the scroll back to Zhu. "Brother Zhua, I can only obtain half of the 7 emotions 6 desires Saint Master's inheritance and the 6 desires Saint Master's inheritance. You also know how complicated the 7 emotions 6 desires Saint Master's secret technique is. I used the 6 desires rings function to cultivate the 6 desires God at a speed of 1 to 1000. After 10 years in the outside world, I barely grasped the method of summoning the God of Desire." Moyan Wushang said with a bitter smile. After talking for a while, Zhuan found out that the secret technique that Moyan Wushang cultivated was called the 6 Desires God. This secret technique was a powerful summoning technique that could summon the 6 Desires God. The strength of each god was very terrifying. Moreover, as the summoner became stronger, the god would become stronger as well. What surprised Zhuan even more was that the 6 desires rings function was to change the flow of time. When Moyan Wushang was cultivating, she had changed the flow of time to 1 to 1000. Although she had only stayed in the pavilion in the sky for 10 years, she had actually cultivated for 10,000 years. Chapter 3659. Wushang. Now that we have obtained the inheritance of the 7 emotions and 6 desires Saint Lord, we should leave this place. I have been in the inner world of the Pearl for too long. I don't know if the Golden Galaxy Army has begun to invade the wandering starry sky. Yun sat beside Moyan Wushang and frowned. He was a little worried. Moyan Wushang smiled and said, "Brother Zhua, I have a way to send you out immediately." Zhuan's eyes lit up and he quickly asked, "What is it?" Inside the merciless, desireless bead, Zhuan did not have any concept of time. After all, this place was always dark and full of illusions. He only knew that he had been in the inner world of the Pearl for a long time, but he did not know how long he had been in there. In addition, he had lost contact with his doppelganger, so he was worried. That is, by combining the power of the 6 desires ring and the 7 emotions tablet, we can form a temporary teleportation array. This teleportation array can send people out temporarily. Moyan Wushang said with a smile. However, Zhuan could see a trace of worry in Moyan Wushang's eyes. "Wushang, do you have anything else to say?" Zhuan asked cautiously. Moyan Wushang was stunned and immediately smiled bitterly. "Brother Zhua, it seems that I can't hide anything from you. The teleportation array formed by the combination of the 6 desires ring and the 7 emotions tablet can only send one person out. This is the limit." "What? Only one person?" Zhuan's eyes became serious as he looked at Moyan Wushang. "Wushang, you should leave first. You have been in here for too long. With your strength, you will have a great advantage in the battle against the Golden Galaxy Army after you leave." Moyan Wushang shook his head and stroked Zhuan's cheek. He said, "Brother Zhua, you must leave. You are stronger than me, and you are now the hero of the entire starry sky. Everyone has high hopes for you. You can deal with the Golden Galaxy Army without me, but you can't do it without me. Also, don't worry. This is not the only way to leave the Heartless Pearl. There are several ways to leave this place in the 6 desires ring, but they are more troublesome and only I can complete them." As he spoke, Moyan Wushang took out the 6 desires ring and placed it on his palm. He then signaled Zhuan to take out the 7 emotions tablet as well. Zhuan looked deeply at Moyan Wushang and asked seriously again, "Wushang, you have to make a heavenly oath. Is there really another way to leave the heartless and desireless pearl?" Moyan Wushang swore without hesitation. He smiled and said, "Brother Zhua, don't worry. I won't joke about this kind of thing." Seeing Moyan Wushang solemnly swear the heavenly oath, Zhuan finally relaxed and took out the 7 emotions steel. When the 7 emotions tablet and the 6 desires ring came together, A blazing white light burst out from the point of intersection and spread out in all directions. Within the white light, a blood-red ray of light shot out and landed on the ground. Like a divine pen, it actually gradually drew on the ground. From the outline of the drawing, it could be seen that the blood-red ray of light was drawing a kind of complicated magic array. After half an incense stick's worth of time, the blood-red ray of light finally disappeared and a blood-red magic array appeared where it had been drawn. Moyen Wushang put on the Six Desires ring again and immediately formed a seal with both hands. The void behind him began to distort and finally turned into a huge black hole. From the black hole, a figure slowly walked out. It was a man with a strong body. His whole body was surrounded by iron chains like armor, tightly sticking to his well-proportioned body. The strangest thing was that the man's eyes were closed. He was actually blind. The moment Zhuan saw the blind man, his eyes became very serious. He could feel that the aura of the blind man was extremely powerful and terrifying. He was truly an existence that surpassed the Heaven-Breaker realm. Brother Zhua, this is the god of desire. I used the Six Desires ring to summon him. Although his strength is only in the divine fetal transformation realm, he is a top expert in the divine fetal transformation realm. Ordinary divine fetal transformation realm experts are simply not a match for this god of desire. Moyen Wushang pointed at the blind man and said, after reading some Heaven-Breaker techniques and obtaining part of the inheritance of the 7 emotions 6 desires, Saint Lord Yuan had some understanding of the specific cultivation names of the Heaven-Breaker realm. The Heaven-Breaker 9 transformations was a very general term. Each transformation had a specific name. For example, the first Heaven-Breaker transformation was the Divine Fetal Transformation realm. Cultivators in this realm would have a tremendous physical transformation, and the Divine Fetal Transformation realm's physical body would be able to withstand the terrifying pressure when entering the chaotic starry sky. This was also why only Heaven-Breaker realm experts were qualified to enter the chaotic starry sky. Cultivators below the Heaven-Breaker realm who entered the chaotic starry sky without permission were simply courting death. This was because the physical bodies of cultivators below the Heaven-Breaker realm were too weak. One had to know that Zhuowen's Pangu sacred body was already very powerful. However, the perfect Pangu sacred body was probably far inferior to the powerful physical body of a divine fetal transformation realm cultivator. Jun looked up and down at the desire god standing behind Moyen Wushang. He could indeed feel that the desire god's physical body was indeed extraordinary. It was much stronger than the physical body of an ordinary divine fetal transformation realm cultivator. Moyen Wushang's right sword finger danced in the void, drawing a rather complicated symbol. Then he gently tapped it on the back of Zhuowen's hand. The complicated symbol gradually appeared on the back of Zhuowen's hand. Brother Zhua, I have already carved the Desire God's talisman on your hand. You can use this talisman 3 times. Moyen Wushang said in a deep voice. In other words, I can summon the Desire God 3 times to fight for me? Zhuowen asked curiously. Moyen Wushang nodded seriously and said, yes, as long as you use your divine sense to activate the talisman, the Desire God will be summoned to your side. As he spoke, Moyen Wushang also carved the same talisman on the back of Zhuowen's hand on the Desire God's chest. When the talisman was completed, Yuan found that he seemed to have a trace of connection with the Desire God. He knew that this connection was caused by the talisman that Moyen Wushang had carved. Brother Zhua, you go first. This temporary teleportation array can't be maintained for long. Moyen Wushang said. Zhuowen nodded and stepped into the teleportation array. He looked at Moyen Wushang and said, Wushang, come out as soon as possible. This way, we can all be truly reunited. We don't have to be like before, running around and being anxious. Chapter 3660. Moyen Wushang stared blankly at her original spot. She gently squatted on the ground, her mouth full of bitterness. Brother Zhua, this is the only thing I can help you with. Moyen Wushang squatted on the ground for a long time before she slowly stood up and returned to the pavilion in the sky above the Rainbow Lake. She did not lie to Zhuowen. There was indeed more than one way to leave the heartless and desireless pearl. However, other than the temporary teleportation array formed by the 7 Emotions tablet and 6 Desires ring, the other methods were extremely difficult. Moreover, those methods required her cultivation to be above the heaven-breaking 7th transformation. In other words, it would take a long time for Moyan Wushang to reach that level of cultivation and leave the heartless and desireless pearl. Of course, she would not say this to Zhuan. She knew Zhuowen's character very well. If she told him the truth, Zhuan would definitely give her the opportunity to leave. Then she would not have much confidence in dealing with the Golden Galaxy Starry Sky, but Zhuan did. In addition to the Desire God, Zhuan had a greater chance of winning. He was also the most likely to turn the tide and save the wandering Starry Sky. Above the natural moat, in a remote cliff, there was a rather large cave. In the cave, there was an extremely dense blood light shining. In the blood light, a passage slowly emerged, and a figure slowly walked out of the passage. The crisp sound of footsteps reverberated within the cave. Zhuowen stopped in the cave and surveyed his surroundings. He discovered that the grand formation that he had set up in this temporary cave dwelling back then was completely intact. It seemed that his temporary cave abode had not been discovered yet. Suddenly, a black shadow flew out from behind Zhuan and rushed out from the side of his face. Bang, bang, bang. When the black shadow reached the entrance of the cave abode, it was blocked by many large array restrictions in the cave abode. Zhuan saw the true face of the black shadow. It was actually the heartless and desireless pearl. When Zhuan reacted, the large array restrictions at the entrance of the cave abode were all torn apart. Then, the heartless and desireless pearl disappeared from the cave abode like a gust of wind. Damn it! Zhuowen's expression changed drastically. He took a step forward and chased after him. When he left the cave, he discovered that the ruthless and desireless bead had already disappeared. Zhuan was dumbfounded. The speed of this desireless pearl far exceeded his by who knew how many times. In such a short amount of time, he had vanished from his sight, and even his spiritual sense was unable to capture any trace of him. This was just too unbelievable. Wushang is still inside the pearl. Zhuowen's expression was extremely ugly. Just as Zhuan was feeling anxious, he heard screams coming from the depths of the chasm. He hurriedly rushed into the depths of the chasm. When he reached the depths of the natural moat, he discovered many fortresses built by mechanical life forms. Between these fortresses, teams of mechanical life were patrolling. However, at this moment, the mechanical army was in a very sorry state. They were swaying left and right, and the fortresses were all in ruins. It looked like they had been destroyed by some kind of powerful force. The great formation set up by the mechanical army at the border was also completely torn apart. From the extent of the tear, Zhuan could tell that it had been destroyed by some kind of extremely powerful force. Zhuowen's gaze passed through the mechanical fortresses and landed on the chaotic starry sky outside the border. He saw a familiar divine ship. This divine ship belonged to Gong Qilyu and NIC. At this moment, Gong Qilyu and NIC were not paying attention to Zhuowen at all. They were using all their skills to fight against something. Zhuowen discovered that Gong Qilyu and NIC were attacking a bead. This bead was the ruthless and desireless bead. Zhuowen originally wanted to go forward and stop Gong Qilyu and NIC, but when he saw that Gong Qilyu and NIC were being suppressed by the ruthless and desireless bead, he stopped in his tracks. The ruthless and desireless bead was an item of the 7 Emotions and 6 Desires Saint Lord. It was very extraordinary in itself. Gong Qilyu and NIC were at most at the spirit change stage of the Heavenbreaker second transformation. It was simply unrealistic for them to stop the ruthless and desireless bead. The Golden Universe Starry Sky has indeed invaded the spiraling starry sky. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the mechanical fortresses below. From the scale of these mechanical fortresses, Zhuowen could tell that the Golden Universe Starry Sky army had already entered for some time. At the same time, he finally got in touch with his clone. In the blink of an eye, the clone's memories in the outside world all these years were continuously transmitted into Zhuowen's mind. His expression changed drastically. It turned out that he had been inside the ruthless and desireless bead for a full 50 years. Moreover, a few years after he entered the ruthless and desireless bead, the Golden Universe Starry Sky Army had already arrived at the spiraling Starry Sky and had a great battle with the spiraling Starry Sky. Later, the clone had a Heaven Breaker powerhouse as his master and held back the Golden Universe Starry Sky, causing the spiraling Starry Sky Army to be extremely wary and greatly slowing down the invasion of the Golden Universe Starry Sky Army. However, as time passed, the Golden Universe Starry Sky Army adopted a gradual invasion method. Over the years, they gradually encroached on the territory around the spiraling Starry Sky and then moved towards the center of the Starry Sky. At present, the Golden Universe Starry Sky Army had already occupied most of the territory of the spiraling Starry Sky, and many of the native living beings of the spiraling Starry Sky Army were enslaved by the Golden Universe Starry Sky Army. Now, the only territory was the valley where the Ryuka of the Xianmi Heavenly Domain was located. In this valley, there were many large formations that Zhuan had set up, and they were a combination of Heaven Breaker Rank 1 large formations, and their power was boundless and powerful. In the spiraling Starry Sky, all the elite powerhouses were gathered in the valley and were defending with their lives, fighting the Golden Universe Starry Sky to the death. However, the Golden Universe Divine Lord had the Snake Shadow Divine Staff, and its power was astonishing. As time passed, he continuously used the Snake Shadow Divine Staff to bombard the surface of the large formation, causing the large formation to begin to totter in recent days. It probably could not hold on for long. This was especially true for his avatar. He had fought God Lord Golden Corner twice, and he had expended his only 2 soul sword intents. Although he had successfully repelled God Lord Golden Corner twice, his avatar had been severely injured. At this moment, the clone was no longer qualified to fight. Everyone in the valley was in a state of panic. What caused Zhuan's gaze to turn even darker was the fact that most of the Ryuka elites were actually advocating surrender. And their leader was actually Taoist 3 Purities. The Ryuka were resolute in their refusal to surrender and were in a very difficult situation. Fortunately, the Golden Universe Divine Lord had yet to launch an all-out attack. If he did, 3 Purities and the others really would turn on him and join the Golden Universe Starry Sky. 3 Purities, you're courting death. Zhuan's gaze was cold and sinister as he took a step forward and landed in the mechanical fortress. He waved his right hand, causing streaks of sharp violet saber light to appear in the air behind him. These streaks of saber light were like a storm, spreading out in every direction in a mysterious manner. Primordial drifting saber. All the mechanical life forms in the mechanical fortress were struck by the purple blade light and blasted into countless pieces. As for Zhuan, he took one step at a time towards the border, staring at Gongji Lu and NIC with murderous intent in his eyes. The only people he was wary of were these 2. If he could kill them, Zhuan would truly be rid of a potential threat. Chapter 3661. Zhuan did not leave immediately after destroying the base the mechanical lifeforms had built in the depths of the natural moat. Instead, he set his eyes on the chaotic starry sky outside the boundary, where Gong Ji Lu, NIC, and the Heartless and Desireless Pearl were still fighting. Gong Kilyu and NIC took out talismans and powerful heaven-breaking divine artifacts as they fought with the Heartless and Desireless Pearl. However, the Heartless and Desireless Pearl was not to be trifled with. It kept spewing out terrifying blood-red light and tangled with Gong Kilyu and NIC. Zhuan could see that the Heartless and Desireless Pearl's power was far from being unleashed. After all, this pearl belonged to the Saint Lord of 7 emotions and 6 desires. If it could unleash its full power, Gong Kilyu and NIC would be killed instantly. However, even so, Gongji Lu and NIC were gradually losing. Zhuan stood at the border of the natural moat and waited silently. Gong Kilyu and NIC were too much of a threat to him. With his current strength, it was no problem for him to deal with one of them. However, if the 2 of them joined forces, one would be no match for them. However, this was a godsend opportunity. Both Gong Qilyu and Nic were being held back by the heartless and desireless Pearl and were severely injured. If he attacked, there was a high chance that he could kill the two of them. Of course, Toan was still waiting. He was waiting for the best opportunity. Puff! Gong Qilyu and Nic both grunted and spat out blood as they retreated a few thousand steps. Senior brother, this heartless and desireless Pearl is strange. Wasn't it said that the heartless and desireless Pearl was useless? Is it useless? How can it be so powerful? Nic said with a pale face. Originally, the two of them had been waiting in the divine ship for news of the Golden Corner Divine Lord's triumphant return. Unexpectedly, the heartless and desireless Pearl suddenly rushed out and left the natural moat, heading toward the depths of the chaotic moat. They recognized it at a glance. It was the famous heartless and desireless Pearl of the Niwa clan. However, the heartless and desireless Pearl was too useless, so it fell into someone else's hands. Gong Ji-lu had originally planned to grab her casually and play around with her. He did not take her seriously. However, what he didn't expect was that when he stopped the merciless, desireless Pearl, he would actually vomit blood from the powerful energy that suddenly erupted from the Pearl. Only then did he and Nic realize that the ruthless, desireless Pearl was not simple. There must be a huge secret within it. Therefore, the two people who harbored evil intentions naturally used all of their abilities in order to completely grasp the ruthless and desireless Pearl. That was why it evolved into this great battle. However, what the two of them did not expect was that the ruthless and desireless Pearl was actually so terrifying, completely suppressing them. Moreover, the bead seemed to have been angered. The two of them did not intend to stop the bead, but the bead did not let them go. It actually chased after them and attacked them. It wanted to kill them. Senior brother, what should we do? This merciless, desireless Pearl is too strange. If this continues, it will be too disadvantageous for us. Nic's beautiful eyes revealed a worried expression. She could not help but look at Juan and continued, moreover, that Juan is still eyeing us from the border. After Gong Ji-lu blocked the ruthless and desireless Pearl's attack with difficulty, he glanced at Zhuowen's figure in the distance and said disdainfully, no matter, he's just a clown. If he rushes over, I can crush him with a single finger. Gong Ji-lu and Nic truly did not put Zhuowen in their eyes. Although Zhuowen had indeed blocked Gong Ji-lu's attack, it was just a casual attack from Gong Ji-lu. In his opinion, Zhuowen was just lucky. If Zhuowen still did not know what was good for him and dared to attack him, then it would be exactly what Gong Ji-lu wanted. He would take the opportunity to kill Zhuowen and take his spiritual ring. He wanted to see how this ant cultivated broken divine force. Senior brother, be careful. This bead's power has increased again. Just as Gong Ji-lu was thinking about Zhuowen, Nic's terrified voice sounded. Gong Ji-lu immediately came back to his senses. He was shocked to find that the ruthless and desireless Pearl was bursting with endless blood light. Within this blood light, a strange and sharp blood shadow swept out and suddenly pierced Gong Ji-lu's chest. The blood shadow's speed was so fast that Gong Ji-lu did not have time to defend himself. Without exception, Gong Ji-lu's chest was pierced by the blood shadow. Gong Ji-lu spat out a large mouthful of blood and was sent flying by the blood shadow. Only then did he notice that the blood shadow's true appearance was actually a rusty blood spear. The blood spear pierced through his body, and his wound could not be healed at all. Blood flowed out and splashed continuously under the starry sky. It was at this moment that Zhuowen moved. He took a step out of the boundary, and his entire body turned into an afterimage. The terrifying pressure in the chaotic starry sky was like countless mountains crushing down on Zhuowen's body. It was as if he was going to explode. The pressure was indeed terrifying. However, to the current Zhuowen, this pressure was no different from scratching an itch. Although his cultivation base had not reached the heaven-crushing stage, with the heaven-defying primordial chaos technique and the powerful shattering divine power surging within his body, his strength was already comparable to the heaven-crushing stage. In fact, the strength of his physical body was not inferior to that of an ordinary divine transformation stage cultivator. "And you dare?" In the chaotic starry sky, Gong Ji-lu, who had his chest pierced and was being forcefully dragged back by the blood spear, naturally saw Zhuan rushing toward him. He also saw the dense killing intent in Zhuan's eyes. This caused Gong Ji-lu to explode with rage. Gong Ji-lu forcefully suppressed the injuries in his body and secretly circulated his power, waiting for Zhuan to approach. As long as Zhuan approached him, he would immediately unleash a full-powered attack. This attack could even kill a divine transformation stage cultivator, let alone Zhuan, who was just an ant in his eyes. A mere ant dares to sneak attack me? How foolish! The instant Zhuan approached Gong Ji-lu, the latter struck out with his right palm. The accumulated energy turned into a terrifying shockwave that blasted toward Zhuan. Gong Ji-lu's attack was too sudden, and he had forcefully used his full strength. His injuries had become even more serious, but he was very happy. He hated the ant Zhuan, and now, this ant would be personally dealt with by him. However, Zhuan's gaze was calm. He was not surprised by Gong Ji-lu's sudden attack at all. Zhuan raised the back of his right hand and used his divine will to communicate with the talisman on the back of his hand, summoning the Desire God. Bang! Gong Ji-lu's attack, which he had been accumulating for a long time, all landed on the Desire God. The Desire God blocked with both hands, barely blocking the terrifying shockwave. However, he grunted as a result and retreated extremely far away. What? Gong Ji-lu looked at the Desire God, who had been sent flying, and was completely stunned. He did not expect Zhuan to suddenly summon someone to block his attack. Now is not the time to be distracted. You should think carefully about who will hold your funeral for you. Chapter 3662. Sword Slash. Zhuan raised the sword fingers on his right hand high up as he stared coldly at Gong Ji-lu. Then, under the latter's shocked gaze, his right hand slashed down. The divine sword fell to the ground and smashed into Gong Ji-lu's body. Then, the green lotus flames erupted like a volcano and suddenly exploded. The dense cyan flames spread out in all directions in a ring-shaped manner at an extremely fast speed. In an instant, a large area of the surrounding starry sky had turned into a vast sea of cyan flames. In the sky above the sea of flames, a green lotus slowly bloomed as if it was some kind of ceremony. Zhuan didn't let his guard down. He once again unleashed a streak of spiritual sword intent and smashed it into the sea of flames. The sea of flames once again experienced a terrifying explosion, and a heart-wrenching scream could be heard from within the explosion. No. Senior brother. Nic's beautiful face instantly paled when she saw Gong Ji-lu drowned in the sea of flames. She didn't even think before fleeing towards the divine ship in an attempt to escape. She and Gong Ji-lu had joined forces, but they were still severely suppressed by the merciless Desireless Pearl. Now that Gong Ji-lu's fate was unknown, facing the merciless Desireless Pearl alone was akin to seeking death. However, before Nic could reach the divine ship, another streak of blood shot out from the merciless Desireless Pearl. It pierced through Nic's back and ruthlessly nailed her to the deck of the divine ship. This streak of blood was exactly the same as the one that had pierced through Gong Ji-lu's body. Splat. Nic lay on the deck, her entire body twitching. Her beautiful eyes were filled with hatred as she yelled, "Merciless Desireless Pearl, you're the sacred item of my Nuwa clan. Why are you attacking my clansmen?" Unfortunately, before Nic could finish her sentence, another streak of blood pierced through the air and pierced through her head. Meanwhile, Nic was completely silent as she died on the deck of the divine ship. Zhuan's eyes were filled with horror. The merciless Desireless Pearl's power was actually so terrifying. It had killed Nic in just a few moves. After all, Nic was a Heaven-Breaker second transformation elite. After killing Nic, the merciless Desireless Pearl didn't stay any longer and shot through the air. Wait! Zhuan's pupils shrank. He kicked off with his right foot and quickly chased after the merciless Desireless Pearl. However, the merciless Desireless Pearl was simply too fast, and its speed was getting faster and faster. In just a few breaths of time, he had already completely left Zhuan far behind. Zhuan stopped and looked at the bead that had turned into Xiaohe. His face was extremely ugly. That is, the 100 Outer Realms. Suddenly, Zhuan noticed that the direction in which the merciless and desireless bead had left was shockingly where the 100 territories were located. Although Zhuan had never been to the 100 territories before, he had seen the outline of the 100 territories through the primordial chaos path. Therefore, he knew the general direction of the 100 territories. The direction in which the merciless desireless pearl flew was the same as the direction in which the primordial chaos way had originated. Although Zhuan did not know why the heartless and desireless pearl had suddenly left, he knew that it had something to do with him taking the 7 emotions steel. Now, he was mainly worried about Moyan Wushang. Although Moyan Wushang's cultivation was not bad, he was only at the 5th decay. In the 100 territories, he was at the bottom. However, Zhuan thought of the 6 desires rings function in Moyan Wushang's hands and felt a little more at ease. The 6 desires ring had the ability to change the flow of time. As long as Moyan Wushang made good use of this ability, his cultivation speed would definitely be above his. Although Moyan Wushang looked a little weak on the surface, Zhuan knew that Wushang was actually soft on the outside but tough on the inside. In addition, he had obtained the inheritance of the 7 emotions 6 desires Saint Lord. Moyan Wushang would have no problem protecting himself in the 100 territories. Thinking of this, Zhuan returned to the starry sky. The pressure in the chaotic starry sky was already a little terrifying. Even Zhuan was almost unable to withstand it. Naturally, he could not force himself to continue chasing after Moyan Wushang. Not to mention whether or not he could catch up, at least if he continued to go deeper into the chaotic starry sky, he would definitely lose his way and eventually die in the chaotic starry sky. Since he already knew that the heartless and desireless pearl was headed to the 100 territories, then after he finished dealing with the matters in the starry sky, he would step onto the primordial path and head to the 100 territories. When he reached the 100 territories, he would slowly ask for information about the heartless and desireless pearl. However, Zhuan did not know that Moyan Wushang had no choice now. The heartless and desireless pearl was not under her control. The heartless and desireless pearl's artifact spirit had awakened and brought the pearl to the cave residence of the 7 emotions 6 desires Saint Lord. Moreover, Moyan Wushang could not leave the pearl at the moment unless her cultivation reached the heaven-crushing 7th transformation. She didn't know when she would be able to cultivate to the heaven-crushing 7 transformations or above. Zhuan returned to the border of the heavenly moat and was shocked to find that Gong Ji Lu and NIC's divine ship had disappeared. Gong Ji Lu, who had been severely injured by his divine soul sword intent and was on the verge of death, was also gone. Zhuan's face darkened. He knew that he had been careless. Gong Ji Lu had suffered such serious injuries and was on the verge of death, yet he still had the energy to escape. At this moment, Zhuan felt a strong sense of danger surging into his heart. At the same time, a green divine arrow appeared in the middle of his back and pierced through his body. Fortunately, Zhuan's reaction was fast enough and he avoided being hit in the heart. This divine arrow pierced through his shoulder blade. Zhuan quickly retreated. He turned around and saw that not far away, a divine ship had appeared from the depths of the void. Gong Ji Lu was barely standing on the deck. He held a divine arrow in his right hand and a divine bow in his left hand. He was facing Zhuan. At this moment, Gong Ji Lu did not look like a human at all. His entire body was charred black, and even one of his eyes was burned away. "You bastard, how dare you sneak attack me? The heartless and desireless pearl is not here. Let's see how you're going to sneak attack me. Today, you'll die for me." Gong Ji Lu's eyes were filled with hatred. He shouted at Zhuan and shot another divine arrow. The divine bow in Gong Ji Lu's hand was a heaven-breaking level 2 divine weapon. It was taken from NIC. This divine bow's power was extraordinary and its speed was also extremely fast. Zhuan immediately used the primordial purple snow divine ability. His entire body turned into a purple shadow. Within the purple snow, he constantly dodged Gong Ji Lu's divine arrows. When Zhuan approached the divine ship, his body stiffened. There was actually a forbidden space restriction around the divine ship. At this moment, Yuan completely stopped. The corners of Gong Jilu's mouth revealed a trace of a sinister smile. He suddenly pulled the divine arrow to a full moon. "Bastard, you're hopeless." Gong Jilu laughed. But soon, his expression changed greatly. This was because a palm had grabbed his right hand at some unknown time and immediately changed the direction of his divine bow. Only then did Gong Jilu realize that the owner of this palm was actually the desire god who had stopped him before. The divine arrow immediately missed. Then, Zhuan recovered his ability to move. He instantly rushed to Gong Jilu's side. His right hand formed a blade and chopped down. A purple blade light turned into a purple crescent moon and cut Gong Jilu's entire body into two. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.